Good evening, everybody, and welcome back then to another LFM stream here for round number 3 of the Case King Pro Series, and we are at the glorious Nürburgring race circuit, where I have no doubt that once again our drivers are going to be putting on an incredible show for us with a special 90 minutes worth of racing for this evening as well. That extra little 30 minutes to add to those pressures of tyre wear management and just overall managing to keep you on your toes for just a little bit extra in what has been a rather chaotic championship so far indeed. Also, just want to say a big thank you to all of the incredible support last weekend on round 1 of season 2 in the Virtual Endurance Masters. So many of you tuned into that. It was an incredible event, fantastic race and showdown all the way to the very end. And round number 2 of that series will be back here over on the weekend after this one at the end of the week. So much to look forward to. Well, we'll have another 6-hour race with that. But for this evening, we have the Pro Series kicking off once more. Our concentrated, adrenaline-filled, drama-packed championship of goodness, where some of the best drivers on ACC go toe-to-toe and compete for some incredible prizes. Last week, Nils Naujoks used all of his wealth of experience in the world of sim racing to get himself to the top step of the podium for only the second time in the Pro Series. It's been a little bit of a while since he last managed it, but around Misano race circuit, the BMW was formidable, and despite a lot of pressure from cars behind, he managed to get that BS Plus competition car along the line first and take a very well-earned victory, and with it bringing himself very much firmly into the championship fights. Championship leader sits as George Boothby at the moment, but he is being put under pressure from the likes of Dario Iamolo and Marco Bischoff. But I can tell you that it is very close at the top of those standings. There is not much to choose between any of these drivers whatsoever. And of course, in this series, for those of you that may be new to the wonderful world of the Pro Series, not only do we have these fantastic races week in, week out, and these drivers competing for prizes, but in this 12-round championship, they will also have 2 drop scores. So the 2 worst rounds of the season will be deducted away from everybody's tally, and it kind of evens out the average performance of the driver as such. So if you do have a couple of bad races, that they don't necessarily factor in to your next championship as much as it otherwise would. And I'll tell you what, somebody who is relying on that more than ever is the reigning champion himself, Luke Whitehead, in the Veloce Esports Mercedes, switching over to that car from his championship-winning Porsche of last season, and he has had a disastrous couple of races, effectively being wiped out on lap 1, and also struggling to really extract the qualifying pace that we saw him being able to put together week in, week out in his championship-winning season 12. Of course, he is a 2-time Pro Series champion, and the most recent one being the season just gone by. So we'll have to see whether or not the Nürburgring is a circuit where he can start to retain and return to a little bit of that form and see what he can do. And someone's actually just pointed out to me he's not on the entry list for tonight, which means that for his championship hopes, that's really a little bit of a spanner in the works for the British driver, because, of course, that it means that those 2 drop scores from the last couple of weeks, it's really not going to get any better from here on out. But it's still a long season ahead, and we know how good he can be. So maybe if he is able to get back to winning ways, he can start to rack in those points in the second half of the season and bring himself back into contention. Enough of all of that, though. Let's have a little bit of a gander at what our drivers will be facing this evening. 15 turns of historic motorsport goodness here at the Nürburgring. Over 5 kilometers of this legendary circuit in towards that first hairpin. Watch out for that, because that is going to be a busy one, I can tell you that. We have had some historical moves through there, and we could have a very busy time on the opening lap of this race. Through into the Mercedes-AMG arena, and then working your way down the hill through 5 and 6. A lot of camber around this circuit is absolutely pivotal to get the car hooked into those apexes, use that to your advantage, and then carry the momentum through on the other side. Dunlop hairpin at the bottom of the hill, and then through those legendary Schumacher S's, up towards turn 10 and 11 as you then continue to climb your way all the way up this incredible hill. Of course, Nordschleife not too far away, and also not too far away perhaps in the world of ACC, but who knows. And then into that final chicane, a very, very scary one out of that, and such a tricky one to put together consistently lap after lap. It can also be a nail-biting end to your qualifying attempts around this circuit as well. So drivers will be heading into qualifying very, very shortly. 15 minutes on the clock for them to get their best laps down and seeing what they can do to make up the grid for 90 minutes of racing this evening. But before we get into that, they will have a short moment of practice to dial in their setups, and it also gives us a little bit of an opportunity to discuss some of the latest and greatest things that have happened to the world of ACC. If you've been keeping an eye on the news and maybe inside of the game as well, you may be aware of the fact that GT2 has finally arrived to Assetto Corsa Competizione with a whole host of new and incredible cars to get stuck into, and as well as that, being able to provide you with some fantastic action to kind of have a little bit of a side from the world of GT racing, but just in a slightly different form to the way that kind of we are typically used to seeing it. Because being able to take GT2 and that relation with GT3, where the cars, they're that little bit less aero dependent, but they got that bit more power. They kind of have that slightly more raw racing experience. When people kind of long for opportunities like kind of Mazda MX-5 racing, where things like aerodynamics doesn't quite play in as much as we see in other types of motorsports, and it really comes down to good old-fashioned hardcore racing. It's effectively bringing into play sort of those elements, but in the context of GTs, and it is just so much fun and so cool to see these cars now featured in ATC. And along with that, we got a little extra bonus surprise to throw in there as well. The A1 GP ring, an incredible circuit, which I'm sure that the likes of LFM will be visiting at some point in the near future, and drivers can get stuck into tackling that circuit. A very demanding one at that. A lot of undulation, a lot of fast, high-commitment corners that you need to put together in order to hook up a lap around there. But also plenty of opportunities for close racing. So we'll see how drivers get on in all of that. So a lot of stuff in the world of ACC coming fresh to the platform, and plenty of opportunities to get stuck into that. So as a result, we are making our way in. I'm having a little bit of shenanigans with the overlays in the background, so I shall try to tackle that at the moment whilst we are not too far away from qualifying whatsoever. And a big thank you to all of those in the stream already who have followed on the channel, and just incredible amount of support, especially in recent weeks. Also very much for the kind words as well in the chat. Almost 1,900 of you now here on the Twitch channel, so that 2,000 follower milestone is just getting there a little bit closer week in, week out, and I can't wait to see where this journey continues to head. And I'm interested, actually, I saw a few people in the chat earlier on kind of discussing the latest and greatest GT2 additions, and also the A1 GP ring, and I'd be so interested to get your thoughts as well on kind of anyone's experiences so far. You liking the GT2s? Is it a different challenge? Is it, is it better or worse than what you were thinking? And also the A1 GP circuit as well, being able to kind of have it's a very interesting one where you've got these big, long straights down, towards turn one, up the hill into the hairpin, back down again in towards the second hairpin. So many opportunities for overtaking on that circuit. So it's and I think, to sum it up, banger track is the first comment, and I completely understand where you're coming from. It is indeed a fantastic circuit, and certainly one that I am very happy to see being featured in ACC. Shall be able to make our way over into the server in just a second. Overlay shenanigans have almost finished being sorted out, and we can see how our drivers are getting on. Like I say, they've got about 4 minutes left of practice to go, and it's such, we always talk about when these drivers are, trying to dial in these final moments and trying to see how they can get themselves in the most comfortable spot before we head into qualifying. And how do you approach it? Do you look to go about it in such a way where you put all the emphasis on qualifying? You try to make sure the track position is secured, especially when you've got 90 minutes, you've got a little bit more time than normal to get yourself dialed in terms of race pace and racecraft, but, race pace ultimately is a thing that's, that's where the points come from, and that's really the thing that's going to establish where you end up finishing in the race. Overall, qualifying is great and all, but is it always everything? But you never know, especially with a turn 1 like this. If you're in the mid-pack, we know how busy the mid-pack of these splits can sometimes be, so it's definitely an interesting one for these guys to be considering. We'll see exactly how they get on as we look to head over to practice now, and we can see we've got Vladislav Kolosov in the number 14 Aston Martin sitting at the top of the timer sheets at the moment. The only man on a 53, does a 53.8 so far, and we'll see how the rest of our grid start to filter into all of that once they get their bids and attempts in. We'll go on board at some point shortly as well to see this incredible circuit in full action, because it is such a fun one to put together. It's a very, it's a very satisfying lap when you get it right. But that final chicane, trust me when I say that is probably going to be, between that and the first hairpin, the first turn around this circuit, is likely to be where the most amount of drama of action takes place in this circuit, because you climb your way up the hill, building a huge amount of speed as you head in towards these final couple of corners. You have to spot your braking point, try to clip these apexes. There's so much time to be found, but equally so much that you can lose in the race as well. Great to see once again in the chat, support for the drivers as well. So do cheer them on, especially if they're going to be working very, very hard this evening. As Nils Naujoks going very quickly at the moment, 8/10 up on his previous lap time, looking to get himself out to the top of the timing sheets and follow on in form from last week at Misano. Of course, that fantastically distinctive liveried BS Plus competition M4. Of course, Nils was rather kind of a BMW specialist for a few seasons, and we saw him make that switch over to the Aston Martin last season. He was up there, he was competitive on multiple occasions, but just couldn't quite get himself into that race-winning position, whereas the second round of the season, we now find him looking to be a championship contender with performances like what he was able to put together at Misano. So whether he can continue that sort of pace and momentum in this one, we'll have to wait and see. Of course, this is, one of his home circuits, and see what he can put together. We've got Marco Shana right now also improving as well, 7/8 up in the Honda. I'm sure that'll be a car that gets a little bit of of applause every time it goes on through. It's kind of, the Honda, the Boatley, especially I long for the day where we have a Nissan back in the top splits again, because it's just, you just want to will on that driver to see what they're able to extract. It's such a fun car, but unfortunately it hasn't quite been as competitive as we may otherwise like, despite the incredible work that the community, of course, once again, a big thank you to all of you and all of your contributions to the LFM BOP that has been put together over the last season or so, bringing us closer racing than ever. And we've got the hopes and prayers that the latest update on ACC, even Mr. Carpet saying in the chat that the Nissan is back. Well, of course, drivers that have already started and participated in a round this season in the Pro Series will be locked into that car for the remainder. However, if we do have any newcomers to the series, who knows, maybe we could have a whole fleet of Nissan GTRs making their way into the server. What a sight that would be to have them on circuit. As final attempts coming through in practice, as Tiskovic in the number 28 has got himself up to the top of the time. She's just about displacing Nils Naujoks for P1 at the end of this session. Matthias Kuhn, who I saw getting some good support last week as well, he has got himself into P4 as these final few moments of practice close out. Michael Frey looking pretty pacey in this number 34 Porsche. Of course, a car that tends to go pretty well around here, especially in that first sector. The Porsche is so good on the brakes, at slow speed, acceleration, that flat six, the way that car puts its power down as everyone flies on out of the pits for their opening laps of qualifying. I think it's Nils Naujoks is going to get underway first in this one. But the Porsche, Sector 1, extremely good. I remember the first generation Lamborghini, that was a car that was certainly able to be pretty handy in that part of the lap around here as well. Very good agility and slow speed, but kind of lacked stability and overall downforce. The second generation of that car, I think, you know, it somewhat retained those characteristics, so should be fairly decent as the cones, oh my goodness, get launched into oblivion. Expect the rest of those to disappear pretty quickly. I would recommend don't use those as your braking point. One, because you can use a little bit of the extra track on the right-hand side to open up that entry into the left-hander, and two, because those cones will be gone within about 5 seconds of driving. Case in point from our lovely Pro Series drivers. But just going back to the Lamborghini, that car, you know, it's certainly a much more well-rounded package now. It's much better overall in terms of tyre wear management, got better downforce, straight line speed, very decent. I think it has sacrificed a little bit of that slow speed agility that made it so good in some specific scenarios, but I think it's still very much strength of that car. So really interesting to see how each of these play out. And every time we go racing week to week in the Pro Series, we're never quite sure who is going to be coming out on top, because not only do these drivers usually have a bit of a preference for certain tracks, but also with this BOP we get such close racing and become so much more about the driver. But Nils Naujoks, the race winner from last week, trying to see if he can make it to on the bouncer. He is going to start the first lap of qualifying for us. We will go on board with the BS Plus competition. M4 then. Number 5 car heading down the start-finish straight towards turn 1. We go braking just before the curb in towards the hairpin. Spots your braking point, tuck it into the apex on the power as early as you can. Try not to bounce into the TC too much as you then hook your way through turn 2. Really use that curb on the inside to pull your way around. Again, braking cross in towards turn 3. Use the inside of that curb to hook the car around. Wind your way in towards turn 4. Little bit of exit curb and the extra track on the left-hand side, but be careful not to go over the limit. Now heading down towards turn 5. All the cones are gone. Using the bit of rumble strip on the right-hand side, then tuck your way through to the left-hander so you can open your way in towards turn number 6. Use that camber, use the curb on the left-hand side, and then carry momentum down in towards turn 7. Dunlop hairpin. Again, look at it. Using all the track that you can possibly get away with. Bit of a double apex approach for this one. Use the camber and the banking to help slow the car down, playing with the gears as well for the engine braking, and then using that curb on the right-hand side to swing the car across into the entry into Schumacher S's. Flat through here if you've got the car to do it. And then up in towards turn 10 now, braking around the 100-meter board, swinging in. Little bit of curves. Some cars are able to take more than others. Bit of a correction there from Nils on the wheel, but nicely filtered through there in towards turn 11, using up as much of the curb on the exit as you can, but be wary of the gravel trap on the left-hand side. You take your wheels into there. That is the run in the final sector, done and dusted. Up in towards the final chicane. Spot your braking point just for the 50-meter board, clipping the first apex, clipping the second, and making use of that curb on the left-hand side. You'll see some drivers using more of that on the entry in towards turn 15 than others, but beautifully demonstrated by one of the best here on ACC. Nils Naujoks heading towards the line now, and he puts his first pin in at 53.0, but immediately displaced by the Honda VTEC power. Here it is, 52.9, but not to be outdone by the man that sits P2 in the championship standings, the Bloche Academy driver, Dario Iamolo, the Italian. Himself onto a low point. But Amir Hosseini in the number 21 Ferrari. I said watch out for this man last week. Didn't quite put together the sort of pace and performance that I thought he may do, but my goodness, that is a big lap time there from the 21 car, and another one of these 296s looking pretty pacey as well in the hands of South African Philip Minnaar in the LFM number 25 car. Good point also made by those of you in the chat. Of course, with the recent update that only came out, I think, a day or two ago, it may have also had a little bit of an effect in terms of the BOP that's currently been put together. So there may be some adjustments that take place over the next couple of weeks. Whether that starts to shuffle things around for competitiveness for this evening, who knows? But right now, Ferrari is looking very, very quick. We're on a 0.6 and a 0.7 between Amir and Philip Minnaar. But drivers behind are finding some pace. George Boothby going quickly and finding a couple of tenths on his lap. So is Marco Schada in that Honda. And we'll look at this VTEC beauty, the number 16 car, rotating his way through turn 11 now. 3/10 up and going purple as it stands, using all of the power that he's got available through the kink of turn 12. And now here's the scary bit. Set yourself up in towards the chicane. Try to get your braking point absolutely nailed. Maybe a little bit cautious through there. Could have taken a smidge more curve, but it was good momentum on the exit. Through in towards the final corner. Manages to hook it back towards the apex. On the exit, Marco Schada trying to go himself in towards provisional P1, and he does by 0.03 of a second. Nils Naujoks managed to improve up to a 0.6 as well. George Booth beating what he can do, of course. Another one of these Ferraris. Didn't quite get the final corner right, but he does slot into P4. As many people in the chat already very happy to see that Honda poking around the top of the timing sheets, although displaced by Mir, finding just a smidge of time. 200s now, the difference between those two, but it does look like maybe the pace differences between these cars a little bit closer than it was looking initially. Maciej Malnowski in the Porsche, the number 19 car, gets himself up into P4. That's more on the money of what we expect from this man. Absolute weapon behind the wheel of this car, one of the specialists of the Porsche from day one. Of course, it's gone through 2 generations, but he is just as mighty in Gen 2 as he was in the first one, and he's seeing what he can do. That car just rotates so nicely through the opening sector, and really able to make use of that lift-off oversteer. I can also say Marco Schada once again finding time, going quickly, as he has found a 10th on this lap at the moment. It's got a little bit of traffic up ahead, but depending on where it kind of places, it's the Aston Martin, it could actually work out fairly nicely. He should get a decent slipstream up the hill. It'll be whether or not it compromises his run through this corner of turn 11. Oh, very close. In actual fact, the Aston Martin can see kicking up the gravel. Aemelo's going mightily quick in towards that final sector. He's not too far behind these guys, but he was almost purple for just a second. Aston Martin gets out of the way. Marco Schada might have had the best run of all, heading through a chicane, carried a little bit more aggression on this occasion, and he has been rewarded for it. Now has to come through the final corner. Marco Bischoff has done a 0.5 to get himself up to provisional P1, but Marco Schada in that Honda trying to see if he can get onto pole position, and right now he has by almost a 10th. Nils Naujoks gets himself onto a 0.5 as well. George Booth, let's see what the championship leader can do, and he gets himself up into P3. Henrik Gamble as well back in the service. Sprout Esports driver. Of course, that roster used to be the K Kramer Racing esports team, with Marco Bischoff, Noah Reader, and Henrik Gamble all moving over to Sprout Esports. And great to see him, number 35 car, back out on track, and he is putting together some pretty good pace at the moment. He has his teammate though, of course, the number 1 man in the server and on the LFM platform. Marco Bischoff, the only other 2-time Pro Series champion, did it back-to-back as well. Mighty stuff from him as he continues to get to grips with this McLaren. He took the Lamborghini last season and has a pretty good success with it, but this time heading over into that Evo edition of the McLaren. A platform that tends to be pretty competitive everywhere you go with it. It's got good straight line speed. It's got good downforce production. Not always the easiest in terms of extracting lap time, especially when you've got a circuit, you know, where kind of the nature of how you utilize the curbs is a little bit on the sensitive side to that. Not the worst, but not the best. And certain places it will struggle. But overall, it's a pretty consistent platform indeed. Matthias Kuhn in the number 7 car gets himself up onto a mid-5 to put himself on the front row of the grid. And the astonishment right now that we do seem to have, very genuinely, a Honda in contention for pole position in the hands of Marco Schada. So we will see whether or not the number 16 car can retain onto that. He's just under a 10th clear of the rest of the field, but my goodness, what an upset that would be. I think the last time we had a Honda pole position, if memory serves, I believe it was at Bathurst a couple of seasons ago. I'm not too 100% certain on that one, but it's a bit of a rare occurrence, so it's kind of something we're not too used to. But right now, this car definitely looking to have genuine pace, at least in 1 lap trim. The only thing about the Honda is it is typically a car that's not always the kindest to drive. It's, thinking to the likes of the Audi. When we spoke to Tinko van der Velde, champion of 2 seasons ago, the Audi, it was a Larry car. It was always a car that, he was able to extract lap time out of, but it came at the cost of him being terrified, I think, during the entire time that he was behind the wheel of it. The Honda's kind of had that characteristic during its entire lifespan. It's just a little bit unpredictable. You don't always quite know how much the back end of that car is going to stick, but if you can master the rotation, if you can get into a state where you're able to deliver that consistency from circuit to circuit, it can be extremely quick indeed. And apparently with a little bit of extra rear downforce on board now, maybe that's where that extra bit of predictability is coming on in. Amir Hosseini going purple in the opening sector. He has found a 1/10 of a second. Was looking very quick at the beginning of this session, but now he's got a little bit of work to do if he wants to get himself back up towards P1, but he's putting together a pretty handy lap so far. Oh, that was a lot of understeer on the entry. See how that compromises him out of turn 6, and yep, that 10.5 or so advantage that the number 21 car did have over his previous best time has been lost as a result. 3.5 minutes or so of qualifying left to go. So a couple more opportunities for lap times to come through and see what these drivers are able to put together. Look at Henrik Gamble. He was up on his time, losing a little bit. Now, we've got a couple of times at the tail end of the grid at the moment. They're improving quite a bit. We've got Lorian Prima in the number 37 cars, found 4/10. Podikov was on a half a second improvement, but has invalidated the lap, and that invalidation has come through on the exit of turn 4. Very easy to do, and that's probably alongside the chicane. The chicane also, I think if I recall, was Schumacher S's, which is a little bit of a weird one because you don't tend to gain time from it, but it is a bit of a sensitive one in terms of track limits within the game. Those are kind of the common areas where those track limits can strike, affecting, of course, your ability to put together your lap in qualifying, but more devastating in the race if it does end up leading you to a drive-through penalty. Not the worst and most catastrophic pit lane to have that in, but with only 90 minutes on the clock for the race, if you get a drive-through, that's almost effectively game over and done with. George Boothby on a lap and trying to find some lap time. So is Amir Hosseini trying to reset after that mistake on the last one. He is having a very good advantage over his previous best time consistently in the opening a sequence of corners, but then loses it on the exit towards turn 4. So it's like commentator's curse there. Feel for the number 21 guys. He makes his way through turn 5 in towards turn 6 and not quite digging that car into the apex. Is touching the gravel by an absolute hair's width on the exit, but not quite finding the time that he needed. Henrik Gamble starting another lap as well, and somebody I think just slotted up the order. I'm trying to see who that was, not 100% certain. But right now we have Marco Scheider still holding on to that provisional pole time under pressure from the likes of Matthias Kuhn in the McLaren. But also Marcus Scheider has had a couple of goes now trying to improve over his previous best, and it just hasn't quite come together so far for the provisional pole sitter. Philip Manar down in P11 at the moment, South African, who was on the front row briefly in the early stages of this session, now struggling to improve on his lap time. So maybe these Ferraris able to deliver good pace, but and consistently deliver that good pace, but the ultimate pace of the car maybe not quite as strong. But even if that is the case, the likes of George Boothby may well be able to do something special over the course of the race distance if that is the case, because especially tyre management of Ferrari, typically a good platform in keeping those tyres in a nice spot, not eating away at them too much, because that incredible downforce package on board the latest and greatest from the Prancing Horse does mean that whilst you are a little bit more dependent upon your cornering capabilities, you don't necessarily lean on the tyres quite so harshly, and it's the slip angles that really start to do you harm in something like that. Philip Manar rounding out the lap. He's had a pretty good final chicane. Luke Addison improving as well up to P17. And number 25 guys found a couple of tenths. It's going to be pretty martial, maybe towards the top 5. It is into P3, 0.03 of a second down on Matthias Kuhn. And Matthias Kuhn actually in the pit lane, so no further than P2 for the McLaren driver, because final bids are coming on in. Marco Scheider is on his last attempt, and he is not finding time, so I don't think there'll be any further improvement. Marco Bischoff, he's looking very quick. He's had an absolutely monstrous final chicane. The number 1 car trying to get the McLaren and snatch it away from the Honda at the last minute. He does on the 0.3 by 800ths of a second. That was a mighty final sector from the two-time Pro Series champion. And Marco Schade, he's 3/10ths down, so I don't think it is going to be a Honda pole position. The despair in the chat heads on through. Dario Emelo, P2 in the championship standings at the moment. Where does he sit? P3 at the end of the session. More times coming on in Nerida halfway through the lap. He's found a couple of tenths. Tiskovic as well on a lap. But last second improvements. And Marco Schade, unbelievable. Just he put together such a good lap in the Honda, but just wasn't able to find those little extra snippets of pace on his follow-up attempts. And Marco Bischoff, his delta was completely flat. There was nothing, there was no real improvement. And that final chicane, like I say, it can make or break your lap time. And that McLaren, in the end, on the final one, sailing on through there. I find it hard to believe that there's anyone else right now that's going to be able to contend with that lap time. Philip Mannar, he improved to a mid-5 on the last lap. He's there or thereabouts on his delta as it stands at the moment, trying to see if he can go any further up, but that's not going to help him, I don't think. Almost off into the grass on the exit of the chicane there. He will head towards the line, but I think more or less it is done and dusted. Nerida improves up to a high 0.5, gets himself into P8, and there is no more improvements coming on through, so that is qualifying over and done with. We'll be very shortly heading into 90 minutes of racing goodness here in the Pro Series to kick things off. But Marco Bischoff, he has that #1 plate for a reason. Whilst he hasn't taken a race victory in a little bit of a while, do not let that fool you. The man is able to deliver under the greatest of pressure, and that was a perfect example. The Sprouts Esport McLaren managing to get himself up to the top of the standings in the end. Fantastic stuff from him. And we will run through our starting order in just a moment to see exactly how they start for this evening's grid. Incredible stuff with all of that. Marco Schade as still very much, yeah, exactly, still a fantastic job from the number 16 car. And also, if you're wondering maybe what these number plates are meaning amongst this grid, so each number is allocated based on the driver's relative elo within the server. So if you see a very high number plate car in a very low number position, take the likes of Philip Mannar, number 25, starting in P5, that is a fantastic result from that driver, because effectively they have outdone the expectation of their ranking relative within the server. So that's what you're always kind of looking for. But Marco Bischoff doing exactly what was expected from him by getting that #1 car into the #1 spot. And we have a really interesting mix of cars at the pointy end of this grid. McLarens, Hondas, Ferraris, BMWs, all very much there or thereabouts. And with 90 minutes of action on the clock, it's going to be so interesting to see how it plays out over the course of this race. And we've got the predictions coming in from Kylo that Marco Schade will be P1 by turn 1. Of course, that launch from the Honda could be pretty handy, and he will be on the outside line heading in towards the first turn. So it's a tricky one to do. We've seen Malinowski pull off an incredible double overtake to head into the lead a couple of seasons ago, and that came from being P3 off the launch. Side by side ahead of him were the cars, and he was able to do that fantastic little switchback to get the Porsche at the time into first place. So definitely opportunities, regardless of whereabouts you are at the start of this one, to be leading by the end of the first lap. But one way or another, I can guarantee you it is going to be a pretty epic showdown here at the Nürburgring. Marco Bischoff then starts on pole position. Another one added to a very long list of poles for that man. And Marco Schade, kind of a little bit of a fan favourite, I'm getting the feeling, in the number 16 Honda, starting on the front row. Great stuff from him. Dario Emelo, P2 in the championship right now, starting P3 with Matthias Kuhn in the next of the McLarens, sitting just behind. Great performance from the Belgian driver. Philip Mannar, the lead of the 296s for the number 25 car, and he starts P5 ahead of last week's race winner Nils Naujoks in the P6 spot. George Boothby, your championship leader, and equal number of poles to Marco Bischoff, as kind of once again our most wonderful and fantastic statman in the chat. Always big thank you to him. George Boothby starts in P7 with Noah Reeder starting in P8. And Mateusz Tiszkiewicz briefly went up to top of the timing sheets, but ended up in P9 by the end of the session. Valentin Barrier rounds out the top 10. Good stuff from him in the Aston Martin. Great to see that car once again being up there, kind of amongst the top level of competition. It was a car that's kind of gone back and forth. There's been times where that car's just been ludicrously quick at certain circuits, and it kind of fell away a little bit, and it's good to see that one coming into a bit more contention. Amir Hassani starts P11 in the end. He'll be a little bit disappointed with that, I think, with Henrik Gamble in P12, Maciej Malinowski P13, and Spansky for the ITB Racing crew starts P14, and Jardier in the number 6 McLaren starts in P15. Michael Frey was looking pretty handy in practice, but the Swiss driver only starting P16 in the end, but still in this incredibly competitive grid. Good effort from him. Jentel van Tielen, the next of the Belgian drivers. He starts in P17 ahead of Luke Addison for Genesis Esports in the number 22. Ferrari 296 of the formation lap starts to get underway. Vladislav Kolosov for Armentario, he starts just inside of the top 20. Next to this man on the 10th row of the grid, Aidan Walsinger, the number 9 car. He'll be hoping to move his way up through the order. Tinko van der Velde in the next of the Mercedes. Man that went battling in an incredible showdown with his teammate Darren McCormack last week at Misano amongst the podium spots. Finds himself P21. Abba starts 22nd with Mattia De Campo, the Italian driver, starting in 23rd place behind him. Igor Ogrodkov, always a man that puts on a show in the server. He starts in 24th place with the next of the Veloce Mercedes in the hands of the Chilean driver Angelina Stroza, starting in 25th place. Daniil Tillich, who put on an incredible couple of overtakes in the Virtual Endurance Masters, had me on the edge of my seat with a side-by-side moment through Blanchemont in that very same car. He starts in 26th place with Paul Lobmeyer, the unluckiest man on the planet, at our season opener at Imola. He'll be hoping for better things today. He starts in P27. Oliver Martins in next to the Aston starts in 28th place. Florian Duacop, great to see him back in the server, and he starts in 29th, just ahead of Lauren Prima in the number 37 McLaren. Dennis Wietschorka, we've seen him dabbling inside the top 20 on a couple of occasions, hasn't quite had the pace in qualifying to do that today. And then Thomas Morant starting in 32nd place. But keep an eye on these guys. They may be looking to make way through field. Saw some support for this man earlier on in the chat. The Visceral Esports driver, Zach Duran, over from America, starting in 33rd place. And the man that was supporting him has just been given a little bit of a warning from the chat. I think it's a little bit harsh, but great to see support in the chat for drivers. Give him a good old cheer. Sasha Vasta for Unicorns of Love starts in 34th place. Neuwirth 35th. Albin Manson 37th. 36th. Krzysztof Makowski starts in 37th, and rounding out our grid is Nikolai Polyakov in that number 32 Porsche. So we will be seeing how our drivers are getting on as they look to make their way to the end of the formation. That's come around a little bit quicker than I was expecting. We'll just juggle those final couple of bits of overlays and get things ready to go for this one, because it is going to be a mighty, mighty showdown with these drivers, I have no doubt. Marco Bischoff pipping Marco Schada to the pole position at the very last moments and looking to try to see if he can add another race victory to that very long tally. 90 minutes of action is about to get underway for round 3 of the Pro Series, and as they all head past the line, who gets the launch? It looked pretty even, but Marco Schada is definitely applying the pressure on to the number 1 car, heading around the outside in towards turn 1. They go. It's a big dive from Iamolo, though, in a 3 wide, and there's contact. Marco Schada off on the exit, trying to cut across the grass, but he's got the inside line in towards turn 2. The Marco Bischoff trying to hold it around the outside, still side by side, but surely in towards turn 3 for Honda. Late on the brakes, the number 16 car trying to get himself in towards P1, and he has done. The Honda lead here at the Nürburgring. I am low around the outside, pushing hard, side by side with Marco Bischoff, who is going to be a little bit grumpy for that contact in towards the first turn. The stewards, I'm sure, will be looking at that. And Marco Bischoff's off! Marco Bischoff's off! He just about managed to keep it together. And Matthias Kuhn says thank you very much and goes up into P3. So the three McLaren, second, third, and fourth. But it's Marco Schada in the Honda that has taken the race lead. Meanwhile, side by side in the background, the Aston Martin and McLaren, but they go into single file. Further down the order, I think it's been pretty busy at the hairpin, as you'd expect. Amir Hosseini with pressure from Angelina Stroza in the Veloce Mercedes just behind. But I need to have a quick look at this because swapping the positions, George Boothby and Noah Reeder, and I think it was George Boothby that came out on top on the drag race at the hairpin. Marco Schada putting the move on the leader in the opening sector, and the gap is already up towards 0.7 of a second, so very good stuff from him. Meanwhile, we've got Kolosov side by side with Oliver Martins, the two Aston Martins trying to have a drag race up towards the top of the hill. Go on board the rear diffuser of Angelina Stroza. Fantastic view of these cars. Surely they filter into single file into the chicane. Don't want to go too aggressive in the early stages of this race. And they fly through. It's a poor run for Angelina Stroza, who in actual fact may be under pressure in towards the final corner, but just about manages to hold on to that one. Meanwhile, race leader is still very much Marco Schada. Philip Madar, the South African, putting last week's winner under pressure in towards turn one. A little bit of a defensive approach from the BF Plus competition driver. That's a dive from Vanti Barrett, the Frenchman, going up the inside of Tiskovic, and they'll be side by side through turn two now. The McLaren of Henrik Gamble is watching on with a great deal of interest behind it all of this. Can the switchback work in towards turn three? Tiskovic covers that inside line, make sure it can't happen. Very close, absolutely nose to bumper through the opening sector, but they will make their way on through safe and sound. Meanwhile, we've got a little bit of busyness heading through Michael Frey with Mattia De Campo, and Mattia De Campo might be a little bit vulnerable here from Daniel Tillich, who's got a bit of damage on the front end of that car, looking towards the outside line, the BMW, but I don't think he's going to be able to make that one stick, and indeed he is unable to, so you have to wait for another opportunity. Tingo van der Velde, I think, has had a pretty disastrous start to the race. He's down in P30, but recovering positions over Luke Addison. 9 positions lost for the Mercedes driver, but he may be about to lose one again. The South African trying to head towards the inside, can't do it. Towards the outside, he'll have to go, and Aidan Walsingham says thank you very much, opens up the door, trying to stick his nose in. They'll be side by side on the exit, on board the Mercedes driver, and he is shortly going to filter back to behind the Ferrari 296 into the Schumacher S as they go. But very close racing. Meanwhile, Marco Schada opening up the gap at the front of the field, 0.7 of a second. The gap between himself and Iemolo in a hot pursuit. Marco Bischoff trying to put himself back into the podium spots as he hunts around the back of Matthias Kuhn in the McLaren just ahead of him. Fantastic shots as they head through that chicane, trying to avoid those very, very spooky curves that can send you off into the grass at any moment in time. Someone that could be looking to make a move in just a moment is Amir Hosseini, locked into the slipstream of the McLaren ahead, but I think he's a little bit too far away. That McLaren's just a little bit too pacey in a straight line. Actual fact, Jodio having a little bit of a sniff towards the inside of Maciej Malnowski in that Veloce Esports Porsche, but just unable to do anything there. Meanwhile, we do have swapping positions. Ognodkov and Santama going side by side, and it does look like Ognodkov has got the move done. He was almost up the inside of Thomas Morant as well, but it'll only be P26 right now for the number 33 car. He's trying to recover positions. He's down 2 positions since the start of this race. And Iemolo, fastest lap of the race so far on that last one. So making sure that Marco Schada doesn't run away too much at the beginning. Sasha Vassner has come into the pits. Disaster for the Unicorn, the Love driver. And of course, pit stops in this race. There is a mandatory pit stop window in the center of these races. And that will not count to that tally because the pit window has not opened yet. So unfortunate stuff for the German driver at his home circuit. Meanwhile, then it's Marco Schada that leads ahead of Iemolo. Matthias Kuhn P3. Marco Bischoff shuffled down to P4 on the opening lap. Nils Naujoks trying to hang with this lead group, but just isn't quite managing to at the moment. He's got a lot of pressure building up with the likes of Philip Manar, Tiskovic, Barrier, Gamble, Spanshiki, Boothby, all very much in this train. There's a little bit of a gap between Ida and Malnowski, second between those two, and with the likes of Jardier and Hosseini being very close as well. I can tell you that Iemolo has got the bit between his teeth at the moment, the Italian driver who has taken a couple of victories in the Pro Series before. He may be part of that academy team, but he knows how to win, and he is very, very quick in this car, and he's closed the gap now to less than half a second. Maybe the Honda good on the opening laps, but not quite able to carry that pace through lap to lap. We'll have to see how it all fares. Someone's gone around. That's Tiskovic that's gone around at the hairpin. He's going to filter back. Oh, that's getting very busy amongst all of those cars. And side by side, that is Boothby. And who is that? One of the Sprout Esport McLarens that's been shuffled out of the way. So George Boothby, that's no reader that's gone down. So Boothby now up into P10. Malinowski now side by side on the exit with that car. Jardier's got a fantastic view of all of this kicking off, and he wants a piece of this as well. Malinowski through. Jardier trying to follow his sister teammate through as well. Little bit of door-to-door contact, bit more than that. Bit of a shove out of the way, but no reader. Managed to keep on track, although I think saying that he's almost got around on the exit. And now Samir Hosseini, terrible laps for the Sprout Esport McLarens because Marco Bischoff shuffled out of the lead. No reader shuffled out of the top 10. Hosseini through. Tiskovic, we didn't quite see what happened to him at the hairpin. Something went wrong. We'll try checking on stewards' inquiries as we go along. With a bit of busy time so far. The word in the chat is send it. Well, that's great and all, but sometimes just a little bit of patience is necessary. No reader, though, managing to then keep on to P14 for time being, but not an ideal way for him to open up his race. Meanwhile, back towards your race leaders, Shada. Iemolo is looking to apply that pressure. Mateus can't quite stick with the pace of these two, and he's got bigger problems right now. And Marco Bischoff applying the pressure behind and filling his rear view mirrors. A little bit of a hop and a skip and a jump from the Honda. Not looking quite as planted. He didn't show the greatest level of confidence through that chicane in qualifying, and that was where Marco Bischoff in the McLaren made up all of his time. So maybe that platform, the McLaren, surprisingly feeling a little bit more planted through that part of the lap, and in a race situation where these guys have 90 minutes of racing to do, could very much be pivotal to where they finish in this one. But it is still the Honda that leads from the trio of McLarens. Big gainers so far in this race, the likes of Martins, Vitschorka, 10 and 12 positions gained respectively. Polikov up 14, Zach Duran up 10 positions as well, make his way inside the top 25. But the likes of Ida, Tiskovic, both of them have lost 6 positions. And of course, Sasha Vassner, not a fantastic start of the race for him either. A little bit of swapping as well, side by side, Florian Duakop and Makovsky. And they've got Neuwirth in the Aston Martin, who's trying to get involved in this as well. He sticks his nose up the inside of the BMW, but I think that gap is going to be shut. In actual fact, he could be under pressure from Aidan Walsingham, who's trying to recover some ground in that Veloce Mercedes, but is unable to do so on this occasion. And he goes a little bit deep into the next sector as well. Oh dear, it's all kicked off. I think there was a bit of a moment there with Bukowski in the middle of the corner, suddenly forcing Neuwirth to slow up. Now we've got a fantastic close-up view of the Mercedes, and just a little kiss on the rear diffuser of that Aston Martin. Gap at the front end of the field has briefly expanded to about 3/4 of a second, but Iemolo looks very quick in this middle sector, and he gains all of that time back again. In actual fact, now down to 3/10 up the hill they go. Let's go on board the McLaren. He heads through the chicane. How do these two cars fare? Honda is a little bit wider of that first apex, not keen on taking that curb, and then a little bit of slide on the exit as well, whereas Iemolo just looking a lot more planted through that final part of the lap. But then the Honda using all of that VTEC grunt that it has at its disposal to power his way out down the start finish straight, and that's going to be a very tricky car to pass. Meanwhile, someone that may be able to make a move is Boothby onto the back of Adam Spansky, the championship leader, trying to move his way up through the pack. He's down 3 positions on where he started. Little bit of door-to-door contact. He's got his teammate of Malinowski who's trying to go for a switchback in all of this, and there's contact between the pair of them, door-to-door, and George Boothby then sent towards the outside line. They're still side by side. McLaren of Adam Spansky fighting his way back through, and he has recovered the spot. George Boothby now with his teammate applying the pressure, and that flat 6 torque and power on the exit is going to be giving a little bit of a headache, but I think teammates helping one another, and in actual fact giving a little bit of a bump draft. Jardier in there as well, but They won't hang around for too long. If they feel like they are quicker and have an opportunity to move up through the field, then I can guarantee you that they will be looking for those spots. Philip Menard once again applying the pressure to Nils Naujoks. 2 seconds the gap to Valentin Barrett behind, I think, after that incident with Tiskovic on the second lap of the race. Something's happened further down the order. Oh my goodness, Jardier and Amir Hosseini around on the exit of the hairpin. What on earth has happened there? Hosseini going to drop all the way down to 26th position. Jardier has lost a lot of positions as well, but something has happened between those two at the Dunlop hairpin. We'll try to see if we can catch it on the replay. So Amir Hosseini behind Jardier on the entry. Is there going to be a little bit of a dive towards the apex? No, it's all fine and okay here. Oh, in actual fact, Jardier went into the back of Massier. Massier managed to just about keep it together, and then Amir Hosseini had nowhere to go. So in actual fact, the incident, I think, very firmly on Jardier there. Unfortunate stuff for him, and then Hosseini just an innocent bystander in all of that. So very unfortunate for him, and he'll be looking to try to utilise the pace that we know that he has in order to reclaim those positions and move his way back up the field. Marco Schada still your race leader, 3/4 of a second the gap to Iemolo. Things are happening though down here. Oh my goodness! Oh my! Oliver Martins trying to get Aston Martin stopped. I think I think that was stopped through just pure willpower at that rate. Almost into the back of Angel Stroza. Thankfully keeps it out of the Mercedes. Meanwhile, Jardier is fighting with Zach Duran, gets himself back into 21st position as Hosseini now trying to go up the inside of Polyakov, who's gained a lot of positions in this race. He's not too keen on sacrificing any of what he has earned. He's earned 13 so far. Vitshalka now your biggest mover, 14 positions gained for him as he sits in P17. Good start of the race for him, and we are only 13 minutes in. A little bit of a slide from Polyakov. And I imagine that Hosseini will be stacking that pressure up very, very shortly and trying to find an opportunity to make a move. Of course, the Porsche, not the greatest car in a straight line. The Ferrari isn't fantastic either, but it's looking like this Porsche is just very slidey in the corners. You can hear those rear tyres absolutely screaming in despair through part of this lap, and you can see also a bit of a hesitation on the throttle. Hosseini able to carry more speed on the entry, but unable to carry the momentum through, so not ideal for him. Maybe also a little bit of damage on board that car as well. Tillich trying to get past De Campo. He can't manage it. What about Van der Velde? Van der Velde does get through. Hosseini's around. Hosseini out of this race and retiring to the pit lane. So it's gone from bad to worse for Amir Hosseini. We'll try to see what happened there. Of course, he wasn't that far away from Polyakov. Did he? I don't know. His car ends up in kind of what looked like a remarkably controlled stop and position, so it didn't scream of an incident. There was the correction. Trying to gain time. Does he just pull over to the side of the road, or is there contact? And yep, he has just bailed out the one. He wants nothing more to do with this race and just absolutely frustrated with the beginning of that one. So very unfortunate stuff for him. Meanwhile, battles in towards the first hairpin. Igor Ognikov has managed to make his way past Zach Duran, and Daniil Tillich has also dispatched of Mattia De Campo as well. So, Jardier sends one up the inside of fellow McLaren. Jardier really trying to get a shift on and move his way back up through the order, and a little bit of contact again. And Ognikov, in actual fact, might have something to say about all of this, carrying better momentum than the two McLarens up ahead of him, looking up the inside in towards the next turn. De Campo trying to keep that gap measured between defending from Ognikov, but also being careful not to run into the back of Jardier. Jardier back up into P20 relative to a start position. It's actually only lost 5 in all of that, but whether or not there's a steward's inquiry on the way for him, we will have to wait and see. Speaking of which, we had a warning dished out for a couple of cars. We've had a 5-second time penalty for the number 21 car, and that... So we have a little bit of a look, as I do need to actually look towards the fight for race lead as well, because Marco Schada under pressure now from both the McLarens. Matthias Good has come out of nowhere in closing this gap, and right now looking very, very speedy and comfortable towards the rear of this Honda. And the number 21 car was in fact Amir Hosseini, so 5 seconds time penalty for him. for an incident alongside the number 19 car, from what I can gather, as also we've just had Tinko van der Velde dispatch of Thomas Morant into the final sector. IMLO just showing his nose towards that inside line, but unable to really set up too much of a threat on the Honda just yet. And every other incident that has been concluded has managed to result in a no further action. But I can tell you what, the stewards have been very, very busy. They have a lot that they are reviewing and going through at the moment. So we'll try to catch up with them. Of course, fantastic work from all of the people that make it possible behind the scenes, so we get this fantastic racing, and we keep these guys on their toes to make sure they don't do too many silly things over the course of this race, and that we try to end up with the best racing that we possibly can. But yeah, there was by the looks of it, no further action for what happened towards turn 1. So the stewards, of course, they have more angles than we do. And whether they put it down to just kind of opening lap shenanigans or kind of along those lines, one way or another, that they've concluded no further action necessary in all of that. Of course, this lead group of 4, Marco Schade, Aiemelo, Kun and Bischoff, all very much still together. Bischoff a little bit further away from this group, but still definitely within tangible distance to compete amongst these other McLarens. We've got a little bit of a trio of fight in towards the top part of the hill before you start to work your way through turn number 11 and barrel on down. Ognodkov in the BMW trying to see if there's anything he can do. Of course, one aspect that we need to be aware of in these, as that's a fantastic run out of the right-hander, and that is Avasanta trying to go around the outside, zagging around, but that's a difficult pass to make. You need to have a mighty overlap in order for that to be remotely feasible. Someone that's got a good run, though, as Sandberg does get the switchback on the exit. So does Tinko van der Velde. He's down the inside of Polikov. Both of these drivers making exactly the same move in exactly the same place and getting themselves up into 23rd and 25th position respectively, although Tinko van der Velde's time maybe not over and done with just yet. Polikov in the slipstream, but he is going to back out of that one. Doesn't want to go toe-to-toe with the Pro Series champion from a couple of seasons ago, and may just feel like that Mercedes is the faster of the group and would actually end up compromising his position overall. Marco Bischoff has suddenly reeled in this train up front. It does seem to just be slowing down a bit. 0.3 of a second faster was the advantage for the number 1 car. So Marco Bischoff shuffled out of the way of that P1 spot and the pole position he put together so beautifully at the end of the session. But now starting to dial in a little bit of pace and very much trying to compete amongst the 3 cars ahead of him. That Honda Schade struggling potentially at this phase of the race. And apparently, we've had something come on through for Dario Aiemelo. He has had a 5-second penalty for the lap 1 incident towards turn 1, so it was still under review as it turns out, and Aiemelo's chances of a race victory have just been made that much more difficult. I'll tell you what, that's going to be a frustrating one for Kun and Bischoff in all this, because those that time penalty will be applied in the pit lane when he serves his stop. But in the meantime, he's kind of got himself between the likes of Kun and Bischoff, trying to head into that fight with Marco Schade for the race win. And Aiemolo's got a penalty that is going to somewhat remove him out of that fight. So it's a bit of an awkward one for these guys, but he won't want to be giving up any positions anytime soon unless the fight from the likes of Kun and Bischoff behind ends up outweighing the actual penalty itself. Bischoff doing a little bit of experimentation down towards turn 1 on how late he can brake. You'll often see drivers, especially the ones that have had that experience, will be trying that out, as Mateus got a lovely run through turn 2. I don't think he can get out the inside of Aiemolo, although the gap has been left, and this might be a bit of a sigh of relief for Marco Schade, who has been driving very hard up front to keep these McLarens behind. Very close in towards the next turn to the outside line. He looks, can't find a car's width through there, and they will continue to squabble away. Marco Schade opening up that gap to 3/4 of a second. this time around. Meanwhile, squabbling as well. Polyakov all the way off for track and beyond. Side by side on the exit with Thomas Morant, flat 6. Power trying to use all that naturally aspirated goodness down the inside at the left-handers. Little bit of a squeeze. Morant barely staying on the circuit. Lauren Prima is getting a fantastic view in all of this. In actual fact, may have a wonderful run on the exit of the corner, side by side with Polyakov, heading down towards the Dunlop hairpin. Now Laporte just about eking out an advantage. Who's braver on the brakes? And the answer is Polyakov. Of course, a very strong characteristic of that car, but it's very twitchy by the looks of it. It doesn't look too happy or planted, but they will stay as they were, as Luke Addison getting very close up to the back of, I think, our only Swede in the field, Albin Manson, in the number 24 car behind, who is bringing this pair into this fight to make this a little bit of a quintuplet for the positions just inside of the top 30. Meanwhile, back towards your race leader. Gap has opened up. Matthias Good did not get a good run through that final chicane. And I think he could be under pressure from Marco Bischoff now, who looks towards that inside line. How harshly is it going to be defended from the number 7 McLaren? Bischoff towards the inside line. Little bit of door-to-door contact in the middle of the apex. But the number 1 car, he has been on the receiving end of some kind of harsh entries in towards that hairpin. And he is very much looking to dish that back out to those around him. Bischoff back into P3, and that is net P2 in this race once Iamelo's penalty is served in the pit lane as well. So he is trying to recover his way in towards a winning position to add to that very extensive tally. Meanwhile, Marco Schada trying to get his first victory in the Pro Series, and doing the Honda would be quite the feat. I don't think anybody would have been able to predict that one, particularly Tiskovic having a bit of a squabble with Noah Reader further down the field in the fight for P12. As it all continues to kick off. Only 20 minutes or so of this race have gone by. We have plenty more left to go to guarantee the action from the beginning of this race. All the chaos, all the drama, all the tension we are going to have to the very end of this one. So Buckley and everybody, it's going to be stellar. Big thank you to all of those that have followed so far in the stream. We're just 26 followers away from 1900. It'd be fantastic if we could get our way over that little milestone by the end of the evening. So if you are enjoying what you're watching, if you're enjoying the incredible show that these guys are putting on, then do consider giving a follow on the channel, because we are back every single week with all fantastic Pro Series goodness. Matthias Kuhn hasn't let go of Marco Bischoff in that fight for P3, but I tell you what, that squabble has opened up the gap to your lead pair, and Dario Emelo, again, looking very comfortable through that chicane. He does have that 5-second time penalty, which is even more of an incentive for him to try to get ahead of Marco Schada, open up the pace, open up what he has got in the tank, and try to see if he can just manage to get away from this group, use that pace advantage, and then minimize the damage of that penalty to his race. Because right now, 5-second time penalty would look to take him to around P8, P9, between the likes of Gamble and Spansky, I do believe. So very much a disappointment if that is what he was to walk away with today, because he quite clearly has a lot of pace in his car. Marco Schada, it'd be interesting to see what he does on strategy. That was a wine moment on the entry in towards the left-hander for the number 11 car. But from a strategy perspective, although we're not quite there yet, just down the inside, that was a defensive move from Vanty Barrett in the Aston Martin, because Henrik Gamble all over the rear diffuser of that car. Very different platforms, very different strengths and weaknesses. Aston Martin, absolutely astonishing under brakes, and a car where you can consistently deliver pace lap to lap. It will eat at its front tyres a little bit more than the mid-engine platform of this McLaren, so maybe the Schumacher S is becoming a little bit of a problem as the race goes on. The straight line speed looking pretty handy on board that car, but acceleration out of the corners through the first sector especially isn't going to be fantastic for that number 8 car driven by the Frenchman. So this could be a very back and forth fight as well, but strategy is going to factor into this heavily. Do you go for an undercut if you're in Marco Schada's position, so pitting earlier than those around you to try to help secure track position and keep the likes of these McLarens behind? Because quite clearly it's very difficult to overtake this Honda. Being able to close up to the back of somebody and being able to make an overtake are two very different things, because that Honda, it has good straight line speed, and it's not half bad elsewhere on the circuit. Again, Iemelo showing his nose up towards the inside line, but just couldn't do anything to open up a gap to get himself into the race lead. Matthias Gunn as well, showing just he's he's very much on pace with Marco Bischoff. So despite conceding that position, kind of a case of, don't spend too long thinking about doing what you're doing, because I'm here and I am actually looking to get a win myself. Of course, Matthias Gunn sitting as your final podium finisher right now, with where we are in this race with that penalty waiting on for Iemelo. We'll just have another little bit of a gander towards the penalty situations. We've had a couple of warnings dished out amongst the grid, a lot of no further action, so no further penalties to report. Definitely the stewards have an extremely busy time. I can see a long list of inquiries that have been noted that they are getting around to. We may just take a little bit of time for them to have a gander at all of those. Iemelo still trying to close the distance to Marco Schade. Such an interesting dynamic between these two cars. The McLaren, high downforce and good in these fast corners. Marco Schade, you can see, struggling for grip. May have had a little bit of a rear downforce increase on the number 16 car, but it's still not quite comparable to the performance that we are seeing from the McLaren, as the number 6 of Jardier carrying momentum, showing exactly why that car is good in these corners. Trying to go around the outside of Daniil Tillich, off onto the exit, down the inside, in towards the next right-hander. That is going to be very close between the pair of them. Out of turn 11 they go. Mattia De Campo will have a fantastic view of all of this. Up the hill they go, but the M4, it's got good grunt, it's got good power, and surely Jardier is not going to threat to go side by side in towards the chicane. He doesn't. He filters in, but Ognorotnikov's using all that BMW grunt to his advantage. He's trying to go around the outside. It's resulted in disaster. Big crash. Tinko van der Velde involved in this one as well. De Campo's around. Ognorotnikov. Oh my goodness, I thought that was going to be a bit of a spooky rejoin. The helicopter doesn't know where it's going. And unfortunately, Mattia De Campo having to do a 3-point turn on the exit of the chicane to get going again. So disaster. That was an ambitious move, and unfortunately it's very, very tricky to fit more than one car side by side through there. Tinko van der Velde was caught up in that. He's immediately trying to reclaim positions down the inside of Zach Duran. He does get the move done, and Jardier also doing the same on to the number 26 of Daniil Tillich. I'm sure that one will be popping up in the stewards room in just a moment. Meanwhile, looking back towards our leading group, as something else I think actually has happened further down the order. What is kicking off between Lauren Prima and Nikolai Polyakov? Very close between these two, battling for 25th position. Trying to look towards the inside was the McLaren, but unable to do so. I think unfortunately I've missed it on the replay now. It's so difficult to tell when you've got subsequent action kicking off whether you're going to miss one thing for the sake of another. So unfortunately I think we have missed that one, but from what I could see, it just looked like that M4 came around the outside of the car that we were on board with. Just a little bit aggressive, not quite enough of an overlap to redo it, because they were boxed in from that from the car in front. But that resulted in contact, snatched across the nose, and then everything that took place after that was just kind of the unfortunate consequences that we are, kind of perhaps not too surprised about. Dario Iemelo has managed to get through on Marco Schade, so Marco Schade has lost the lead on this lap. There's me talking about trying not to miss certain bits of action. What we will try to do, so we'll try to go back on the replay by quite a considerable amount. Hopefully, if I'm lucky, it has already happened. So something in the opening sector, Marco Schade has dropped the position. He is still in the net race lead, but now the problem is that Marco Bischoff, who is the car that is very much trying to get himself back in towards a race-winning position. Iemelo with that penalty, unless he is absolutely mighty over this next series of laps, is going to be in a tricky spot in order to make up any positions or moves. And, of course, that 5-second penalty will look to drop him back further down the order. So he will likely have to come back through the field. But Schade, and apparently a dive with contact into towards turn 1. Oh dear, Iemelo's day might actually be about to get a little bit worse then. Of course, he has that 5-second penalty for an incident very similar to that at the start of the race. And maybe looking to get another one. So whilst he has brought himself into a little bit of hope for taking the race victory, if he wants to push on from here, he may have another penalty coming his way. So Marco Schade still sitting in the net race lead, and Marco Bischoff sitting about just under 3/4 of a second behind with Matthias Kuhn in tow. Nils Naujoks as well, not too far away, still defending from Philip Bernard, and anything can happen in this race. You can never count out this man if there is an opportunity for him to use his experience behind the wheel and navigate some pretty tricky situations. You can always guarantee that he will be the first in to do something amongst that. And Veit Schorker, a man that's been on the move in this race. 14 positions still the net gain for the number 17 car, who sits in P17 and currently trying to apply the pressure to Oliver Martins in the number 23 Aston Martin. We'll keep an eye and see if he is able to make anything stick. Meanwhile, Lauren Prima and Nikolai Polikov very close together. We've got Rodikov going almost off the circuit, trying to head up the inside now in towards the final chicane. It's been a big time, and that's Polikov off into the wall. Rodikov has a much simpler time through the chicane on this occasion and heads on through, but Polikov down into the gravel. I don't know whether or not he did make contact with it. I can't. There is definitely a bit of damage on board that car. We already knew that the Porsche was twitchy, but I think when you have a McLaren certainly at the back of you, it's certainly one that's going to end poorly. So we'll have a look again. We'll go on board the helicab. Oh, it's gone to the wrong car. Come back. There we go. On board the helicab. So just into the braking zone. Just a bit of a misjudgment. He does hit the wall, and he hits the wall hard as well. And then we see Prima continuing on, but Rodikov taking both of those positions. Of course, he may end up conceding some of them in the process if he does receive any form of penalty for the previous incident at the chicane. We'll try to catch up with stewards in due course, but very unfortunate for Polikov, who has such a good opening phase of the race, gaining a lot of positions. That all comes to an end. Meanwhile, Dario Amelo using the pace that he has kind of hinted at so far in the first half an hour of this one. Gap 3/4 of a second to the Honda behind, but these three that you see on your screen right now, Schade, Bischoff and Matthias Kuhn right now, this is really the fight for the race win as it stands. Checking in on any further penalties. We have had some come on through as Marco Bischoff had a mighty run. Almost thought about going around the outside. Oh, that was a mistake from my Emelo, actually, just up ahead. Not a good line in towards the chicane whatsoever. That McLaren coming unstuck in the final chicane for the first time. It's amazing how quickly that can turn things on its head. But just for a moment, Marco Bischoff had his first sense of opportunity at making his way back into the net race lead, but he knows he's got just under an hour to play with, as Valentin Barrier, Henrik Gamble, and I think Gamble might sense an opportunity up the inside. The German driver's looking to go side by side in the middle of the corner. Room given between the pair of them. Great racing so far. Henrik Gamble sent towards the outside line. How's he play it? Does he go for the over and under? But he can't quite get the traction down. Does get someone up the inside in towards turn 3 from very far away. Oh my goodness! How did they avoid contact there? I think there was an absolute pixel between those two cars, but somehow Valentin Barrier manages to keep it on the black stuff, and he's still got Henrik Gamble all over his gearbox, who may go up the inside again. In towards turn 5 they go, and they can't. Valentin's got a little bit deep under brakes, but he's managed to keep it on the track. And this fight is kicking off because Adam Spansky, George Boothby, your championship leader, getting involved in all of this as well. And this is also going to be a very interesting race in terms of championship, because IMLO, P1 at the moment, that penalty will drop him down the order. That's the man that's P2 in the standings. Bischoff, P3 in the championship, currently looking to fight out for the win as Henrik Gamble looking towards the inside line of Schumacher S's, but can't make something stick there. Backs out of that one. And then you've got the likes of Boothby down in P10 as it stands at the moment. So we could see a lot of those gaps close up. Nils Naujoks starts to bring himself in as a contender right now on target for P5, maybe even a P4 finish once those penalties start to roll on in. Like I say, we did have some additional penalties that had come on through whilst things were all starting to kick off. And so we had a 15-second time penalty for the number 8 car, and that belongs to Valentin Barrier. So the Aston Martin, the Frenchman that sits in P7, that will be served in the pit lane, and that will be a hefty impact on his net race position. A lot of no further actions further down the list, and that is the only more recent penalty that I can report on for the time being, but still a lot of stuff going on in the stewards room as much as it is going on over here in the comms box. They all stay single file this time around. Andrzej Spansky getting pretty close to the back of the McLaren ahead of him on that occasion in towards turn 1. But holding position for the time being. Gap between Schade and Aiemelo opening up to around 3/4 of a second. And to answer the question in the chat, yes, I am juggling a few things on a single monitor, I'm afraid. So it is a little bit of a fun one here in the COD box at times. So between all the action that these guys give me on stream, and then trying to juggle all of the wonderful tech that we sometimes have to have some shenanigans with, that it is certainly a busy time, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Meanwhile, Gamble once again now looking out the inside of a Dunlop hairpin, can't make it stick. Van Steen deliberately going deep on the brakes on the entry. You can see he's trying to sneak his way on the inside, but he can't make it stick. Also, if you heard in the background, engineer pit window is now open, so we'll start to get some answers over how these drivers are going to be playing out their strategies over the course of this race. Will they look for the undercuts, get track position, or will they go for that kind of... Tinko van der Velde really was, I wouldn't say a pioneer. Of course, the overcut strategy is something that existed in motorsport for several years now when we've had, pit stops in races, but he's certainly someone that has put it down in the Pro Series on several occasions. And Marco Schade, he may have conceded the P1 position on track, although I'm not sure that's helped him. He's flashing lights, not very happy with Aiemelo. Of course, these two did swap positions due to some contact, but look at that. Very much nose to tail now. Schade, Bischoff, Matthias Kuhn, and Philip Manar, the first one of your top 10 to come into the pits. No Reader as well for Sprout Esports. So those guys going for the undercut. Meanwhile, anything happening? Matthias Kuhn sends one down the inside of Marco Bischoff. He lost the position a few laps ago, and now going side by side with the number 1 car on the LFM platform, the 2-time Pro Series champion, trying to get the power down on the exit, but the TC0 Meta doing no favours to the Belgian driver, who will have to stay in net P3. And all this time, Nils Naujoks, last week's race winner, starting to sneak his way on in. Meanwhile, Oliver Martins has gone down the inside of Dennis Wietschorker and has managed to get the move done. But very close stuff. Matthias Kuhn absolutely glued to the rear diffuser of the McLaren ahead of him. And it's just given Marco Schade a little bit of breathing space in that number 16 car. And the breathing space has been very, very slim for Marco Schade. 3/4 of a second has been about the greatest sigh of relief that he has been able to have at any given moment. Dario Aiemelo has managed to now open up that gap to just under a second to Marco Schade behind in the Honda. But of course, with that 5-second penalty and maybe another one on the way, he is very likely to end up dropping down the order. Matthias Kuhn still applying the pressure, can't make anything stick there. Adam Spansky glued to the back of Henrik Gamble with George Boothby in tow as well. The Ferrari struggling a little bit to make up moves. Looked very handy over one lap in qualifying at times, but net pace is not quite there in the race. Well, the pace could be good, but if you don't quite have enough straight line speed, as both Bischoff and Matthias Kuhn come into the pit centre, Marcus Schade has decided to stay out, and that could be very, very interesting, because it does look like on race pace the McLarens are a little bit stronger, and depending on how powerful this tyre advantage is on the undercut strategy, could be pivotal as to whether or not the Honda is able to maintain track position after the stops are completed. So those two into the pits, and we'll see how that one plays out, and keep an eye on their lap times as well. We've also had a 5-second time penalty dished out for the number 21 car. Excuse me, that was something that we had on through earlier. So we'll scroll down the list a little bit, because I do believe we've had something else. We do have a penalty on the way, but it hasn't been confirmed yet, so I'll hold fire for now, but we will have another steward's decision coming on through in just a second. So closest fight on circuit as it stands is what we have on our screens: Martins versus Wietschorker, as Wietschorker continue to try and make his way through a field, of course, with cars coming into the pit lane. That 19 seconds positional gain for the number 17 car, a little bit offset in that sequence as it stands at the moment, but still he has had a big charge through field so far. He's been showing good pace, accumulating over the course of the last couple of seasons and making himself a bit of a regular in the top 20 in qualifying, having gone from being very much kind of at the tail end of the grid. I hope he doesn't mind me saying that, but it's fantastic to see the level of improvement that he has shown over the last couple of seasons, and and that is being exhibited both in racecraft and also one lap pace. One lap pace not quite on show today, but in the race he is looking to make his way up through the order. Meanwhile, Henrik Gamble, this is very interesting, very close to the back of Matthias Kuhn. Now, we don't know whether or not Matthias Kuhn had a little bit of a slow pit stop that could have closed up the gap between these two, but bearing in mind Henrik Gamble did stop a bit earlier and would have been utilising that fresh set of tyres to close up the gap. So it's going to be very interesting to see how much this plays into effect. Adam Spansky into the pits as well. So as Mateusz Titkovic, both of the ITB Racing crew, come into the pit lane and to get a new set of tyres on their car. We're not at the halfway point of this race yet. So, as Dennis Wietschorker in the background as well, you can understand why he would have gone for that. Perhaps feeling like he's a little bit held up behind the Aston Martin at the moment. Tinko van der Velde, see what he can do. Like I say, he's someone that has quite often made use of the overcut strategy. He may look to do the same again. Try to see if he can use his racecraft and experience to make his way up through the order in a car that doesn't quite seem to have the sort of pace that we might have typically expected. It hasn't really worked out for a lot of these guys. There are a lot of cars and drivers that switched over to this Mercedes for this season. And we kind of, usually when a lot of the top guys in the world of ACC start to favour a certain car, you kind of have to sit back and think, there's probably a good reason for it. But so far, it doesn't seem to have... last week at Misano was probably the best that we've seen. Definitely was a car that was out there. McCormack did get taken out at Imola as well. We never quite got to see what he would have been capable of there. It's traditionally a car that's gone very well around that circuit, but it's not something that seems to be working all too well right now. Adam Spansky has gone later than Matthias Kuhn, and he is very close to the back of that car. So I am starting to doubt whether or not it's the undercut that was powerful, or if it was a mistake from that number 7 McLaren in the pit lane that's dropped him into the clutches of some of these guys inside the top 10, because Adam Spansky, like I say, went a lap or two later, swapping of positions. The two BMWs, Tillich down the inside of Ogrodnikov. I think they have done their pit stops, if I'm not mistaken, as they squabble away. But out at front still, 3/4 of a second is the gap between Iemolo and Marco Schade. Iemolo, of course, with those penalties, or at least one penalty, will be delivered to him when he serves his pit stop. Nothing else has come through, nothing else confirmed as of yet. A couple more cars in. Kolosov, Martins into the pit lane as well. Tinko van der Velde once again glued to the rear of Abba Santama, but I'm just not convinced he's close enough. He's gaining a little bit in the slipstream, showing his nose on the inside. He is going to send it from far away. It's a big dive down the inside for Tinko van der Velde, your Pro Series champion from 2 seasons ago in the Audi, switching to the Mercedes for this season. Can he go for the over and under on the exit of turn 2? It's covered off by the McLaren, but he will send out the inside. Surely, confidence under brakes for the number 3 car down the inside, but the McLaren will have the inside line for turn 4. He'll have to go the long way round, use all the track and a little bit more to carry the momentum on the exit, and with a bit of a slide, it does look like with the inside line in towards turn 5, Tinko van der Velde, the young Dutchman, is going to make his way through, and Santama will drop to P10. Of course, these positions will shuffle around somewhat once the rest of these stops are completed, but at least as it stands, Tinko van der Velde gets himself on track into the top 10. Meanwhile, I need to check in on these guys because Matthias Kuhn, Spansky, Gamble, all very close together in these McLarens, and that's always an interesting one when you're in one of these trains but everyone has the same car. Each of your cars is strong and weak in the same areas, so it very much becomes a case of who's able to extract more from the package, and maybe just a little bit of a bit of a setup aspect side of things as well, confidence in the car. We've seen that the likes of the chicane, depending on how much you're willing to risk, can very much determine where you are fast on the circuit. It may open up opportunities in towards that final turn as well. So definitely some interesting things there. Malnowski coming into the pit lane as well. And also, in terms of the wonderful overlays that we have on screen, they are brought to you by ACC TV, alongside ACC Drive as well. Many wonderful sponsors that make a lot of this possible with this custom little UI for the LFM stream. Yellow flag. Oh dear. Michael Frey brought out the yellow flag for just a second, and he's coming into the pit lane. I think it might be a bit of a wonky moment within the server. I think he's okay. I can't see too much of the word catastrophes, so we'll see if he kind of shuffles his way back into where we would anticipate in just a moment. As meanwhile, Aidan Walsingham in the number 9 Mercedes trying to clear the BMW of Makowski in front. We saw Tinko van der Velde a couple of laps ago doing it around this section of the circuit. And just, very much requiring to force the issue and put the car ahead off the line and then being able to do something from there. Meanwhile, Marco Bischoff then coming out barely in front of Philip Menard, and there is Matthias Kuhn. So Philip Menard has gone for the went for the undercut strategy. He was the first inside the top 10 to box, and he has gained massively in all of this because he is absolutely glued to the rear of Marco Bischoff now. Bearing in mind, he was applying the pressure to Nils Naujoks prior to this, who was sitting in net P5 in this race. So Philip Menard getting himself into podium contention, and that Ferrari, I think, very much well executed on the number 25 side, using the fact that that car, one, should be able to look after its tyres for quite a long time, so won't suffer too much in terms of the drop-off later on in the race, as George Boothby's had a moment, the championship leader. The Ferrari, the Samir Foch coined the previous generation of his car the bouncing donkey, and I've got a horrible feeling that for George Boothby, who was looking to pull off our overcut strategy, that one of our main top contenders for the championship, because you can never rule them out, coming into the chicane now. How much curve does he take? Is it the first or the second apex? The first one's okay. There we go, just the smallest amount. It's not the worst excursion in the world, and of course, rather opening up the engine. I think, that's the sort of genius that we have from these guys. He was just merely taking a wider entry into the pit lane so he could really maximise the late apex in all of that. So George Boothby minimising the damage done to his race in that. Marcus Schade is in the pit lane as well. Aiemelo, Narks, Tinko van der Velde, Santama, Prima have all stayed out. Meanwhile, also had Thomas Morant coming into the pit lane as well. But checking in on where Marco Bischoff and Philip Menard are, because Marco Schade only just leaving the pit lane now. In actual fact, he's going to be right around Matthias Kuhn and the likes of those on the clouds behind. They're a bit further behind. So Marco Bischoff on strategy. I don't know whether or not Marco Schade had any form of a slow stop in that as well. But right now, out of nowhere, Bischoff back into P1, and Philip Menard has himself in contention for the race win. A mighty bit of strategy, and it was a slow stop for Schade. So disaster. And that is very, very frustrating. Very fine limits for these guys. But the experience of the number 1 car, he's got that number 1 plate for a reason. And the man that started on pole was shuffled out of the way on the first lap of this race, has now got himself into the race lead. He's got the South African of Philip Menard, who's had some impressive performances as of late at the tail end of last season, but is putting him under pressure. Of course, also keep an eye on Aiemelo, because going for that overcut strategy, and there is a bit of a significant gap. Bearing in mind, so Aiemelo was leading this race. 4.5 seconds is the gap between Schade and Menard. It's very likely that Aiemelo could come out in what would end up being around P3, P4, depending on where Nils Naujoks filters into all of this as well. Daniil Tillich and Thomas Morant having a squabble with Igor Odnikov in towards the Dunlop hairpin. They go, who's going to come out? That's a very late move to the inside line. It ends in disaster, and it's another 2 freebies for the white M4 of Odnikov. And I think that was a little bit of an ambitious move to the inside line at the braking zone. The gap was there. I'm sure the stewards will have a look at that one. I think we may be able to risk having a look at the replay and see if we can catch what happened there. We'll go on board Thomas Morant's perspective. So here comes the M4 coming into the braking zone. And that's a tricky one. because it very much closed the line, so McLaren know where to go. But at the same time, Thomas Brown maybe a little bit ambitious on the brakes, maybe a bit unsighted with the M4 to his left-hand side as well on the entry. So, we'll have to see what the stewards make of that one, because I can't call it. I thought to start with it was a bit more clear-cut, but I'm not too sure in all of that. Meanwhile, Nils Naujoks still in that BMW, not coming into the pit. He has stayed out. Tingo van der Velde out there as well. Marco Bischoff gapping away from Philip Menard, who does have fastest lap of the race, but newer tyres on board the McLaren driver and your net race leader as it stands. And Iemelo did come out behind Marco Schade in the end, so that penalty did drop him a bit further down the order. We're not quite sure whether or not he'll have another penalty on the way at some point, as George Boothby also run out sitting in P10, as Nils finally does come into the pits. Of course, the pit window would have been running out fairly soon in the grand scheme of things. Tinko van der Velde, we'll see what he looks to do, and he does do the same. So these two cars, the last to come into the pit lane. So once they have emerged out of there, we will have a fully representative order as to where everyone is in this race, because we are now beyond the halfway point. We've had drama since the very beginning, and I have no doubt that it's going to continue all the way to the end of this race. We do have a penalty which kind of was semi-signed off, but I don't know if it was actually dished out in the end. It was the number 22, at least I can say, it was under investigation, as also checking back at Jardia. He's putting all sorts of pressure onto his sister teammate Angelina Stroza in the Mercedes. Number 22 car was someone that is no longer in the server, I don't believe, so that would probably explain the reason why it was never dished out, because it didn't need to be in the grand scheme of things, and yet confirm that it was Luke Anderson that was under investigation there. Thank you very much to the wonderful spotters in the chat. As looking further down the order, we had a second warning for the number 11 car, and so that was an extra 5-second time penalty given to Dario Iemelo, I do believe. So he has got that, and also a 10-second time penalty for the number 37 car, and that car belongs to, as I try to scroll down my overlay, have a look at the driver's list. That is Lauren Prima for that three-way incident that I do believe that we had up towards the chicane there. So a 10-second time penalty for him. A few more no further actions in the stewards' room as well. And that is all we have at the moment. Marco Bischoff then leads this race after having to fight his way back through, both on track and through strategy, with Philip Menard using strategy to his advantage to sit in what right now is quite a comfy P2. And also, Nils Naujoks, that overcut has worked out extremely nicely for last week's race winner, because he has emerged out of the pit lane in P3, and he has the freshest tyres out of anyone sitting ahead of him. And Philip Menard especially, Marco Bischoff might have a combination of pace and also enough tyre life to hold off any late charge from this BMW. But Philip Menard, who was unable to overtake this BMW in the first half of the race, may come under a bit of pressure depending on what sort of lap times the M4 driver is able to string together over the course of the next 38 minutes of this one. Like Zatišković battling away with Noah Eder in the fight for P11 as they squabble on, see which one of these McLarens comes out on top. We'll go on board briefly through this chicane. You can see flying on through there. So tense in the car every time you go through. Sometimes, especially depending on the setup of your car, it feels like a little bit of a lottery as to whether or not you're going to make it through there safely or not. But neither one of them really gaining or losing out to the other. See the slipstream giving a little bit of a toe effect to Zatišković, but unable to do too much. Meanwhile, I think a mistake from Oliver Martins has opened up an opportunity for Abba Santama now to apply the pressure. McLaren locked into the slipstream. This is for inside of the top 20 as they fly on down towards turn 1. We've seen some dives before. Surely that would be a bit too far away, and the Aston Martin has got enough of a straight line speed advantage to hold off any challenge from the number 27 car. So an opportunity will have to come around on another occasion. As I can also tell you now, gap right now between Menard and Naujoks has roughly maintained itself between one. Nothing too exceptional in either direction. The pace from Menard a little bit lacking compared to Marco Bischoff. No major surprises. Bischoff was your pole sitter and is on fresher tyres as well. But it's not half bad from the Ferrari. But it depends whether or not he can consistently maintain that all the way to the end of the race. We see one Ferrari already fall victim to the final chicane. could possibly end up seeing another, depending on how it all falls for these drivers. But Nils in that BMW. Doesn't look like right now he is on for race victory number 2 of the season, but it would be another very good yield from the number 5 car. And 2 places on the podium, regardless of where those spots are, as the margins between positions in this championship for how the points are dished out is relatively small. So it's, you know, you do need to kind of bank in the race wins from time to time when you can, but it's not the ultimate, you know, the criteria for winning a championship. Consistency is what will deliver it in the end. Generally speaking, much like a lot of other series, but very much the case here in the Pro Series. 53.4 for Nils Naujoks. That was faster than both the cars ahead of him, although Marco Schade was just a little bit quicker on the last lap. So Honda VTEC Power not quite out of the fight just yet. Tiskovic still applying pressure to Noah Rieder, but unable to dispatch of the number 15 McLaren in front of him. Vanti Barrier getting involved in some squabbles as well with the biggest mover on the grid, Dennis Wietschorker. 15 positions is the gain that he has had, but he's got the Frenchman right now, who is very likely the faster of these two. Pit window now closed because everyone has served their stops, so no major concerns up and down the field there. But this number 8 car, especially in the early phase of this stint where the tyre wear won't be as significant. Those, like I say, those front tyres can start to scrub a little bit on these front engine cars. The time goes on, the high speed stuff for Schumacher S's. Some of those corners in the final sector can be a little bit tricky when that starts to happen. But as it stands right now, Vantine looks like he's got the pace advantage in the car and applying a lot of pressure to Wietschorker. Will go on board the front splitter of the Frenchman as they head through the Schumacher S's. You can hear a little bit of a lift, flat in quali, especially when you've got a loss of downforce over the front end of your car. So you actually think about moving. Oh, I thought he might try sneaking one up the inside there, but he's deciding to wait. Jardier up ahead is also looking over the rear bumper of Angel Innestroza. A bit wide on the exit for the McLaren, but it is still good out of turn number 11 there, as a bit of a mistake there for Noah Rieder. So Noah Rieder has gone off at the chicane, and that's allowed the ITV Racing McLaren to sneak his way on through. And that's the wrong one. There we go. Over to the replay we go. So we almost started displaying the result with half an hour left on the race to go. Noah Rieder closing, having the gap closed by Tiskovic on the run up the hill. Is there any contact? Hopefully not, but I think it could just be a little bit of a hop and a skip and a jump. Ah, there we go. First curve, second curve. Can't quite keep it on the tarmac by the time he gets to the exit of the penultimate corner, and Tiskovic just keeps it composed and slots his way up into P11. In all of that, as Valentine has tried to make the move on Wietschorker, but Wietschorker's having none of it. The Aston Martin is shoved wide, and there's a big dive towards turn 3. Oh my goodness, I thought there was going to be contact again. That little bit of room given on the inside, that could open up an opportunity on the exit, because it's the better line through turn number 4. Aston Martin trying to hassle the back of this McLaren, can't get towards the inside line. It's middle of the road defending from Wietschorker, maybe a late lunge in towards turn 6, but the Aston cannot get there, and the McLaren does a good job of getting the power down on the exit. I'm sure the Frenchman will be a little bit frustrated perhaps with that opening sequence, but we didn't quite see how it started at turn 1, so maybe it was all fair game by the time they got to turn 2. It's kind of, you know, sometimes if you do get shoved out a little bit from another car, you kind of have to expect, you know, that car that's been shoved out will likely respond not too kindly at the following sequence of corners. So it kind of a bit of a give and take situation in all of that. So you kind of end up kind of almost deciding some of your own racing. And I imagine if that was the case, the stewards will look at a no further action outcome to all of that. But we didn't quite see how it all started. So we will check in on this fight as it progresses. I can also tell you, Nils Naujoks once again lapping very quickly, 53.2s from the BMW driver, 0.6 of a second faster than Philip Menard, and not an inconsiderable gain over Marco Bischoff either, who, bear in mind, is only 1.2 seconds up the road. Half an hour left of this race to go. Valentine Barrier having to stamp on the brakes in the middle of the entry to that corner. To avoid any further contact. Tinker van der Velde as well, starting to charge up to the back of this group, and he's on very fresh tyres as well, so he might be able to make up some positions. But this overcut strategy from the BS Plus competition driver may be... Oh, there's contact with Vinshalker. Vanity Barron is a little bit slow on the exit. Michael Fraser, thank you very much. Oh my goodness, 3 wide in towards turn 2. Tinker Van der Velde flashing the lights, so he was there on the inside, not happy about having his line cut off on the entry there whatsoever. And I think they are going to maintain position as they are for now, so we will try to catch it on the replay. We'll go on board the Aston Martin of Van Zien Barrett. Kind of showed his nose towards turn 1. You see Vinshalker goes a little bit wide. That's awkward because Vinshalker was surprisingly slow. That was where it got super close with Tinko. Had to go all the way over the grass in order to avoid any additional contact in that one. But the McLaren was very slow on the exit, but at the same time, to some extent, that doesn't matter. You know, Van Zien is in control of where he places his car, and I don't know. It may go to an NFA, but we'll see. The stewards have plenty more angles than we do, but I'll tell you what, in terms of moves, it could still be happening right now. It's a big run for the Frenchman around the outside. He looks to go. We'll go on board with Tinko Van der Velde, who's watching and waiting for it all to unfold and trying to see if he can make his way on through side by side in towards turn 11. Over and under for the Mercedes. He's on those fresher tyres. Remember, now it's a drag race. Van Zien Barrier through and behind. The Mercedes driver has managed to get himself up into 18th position and maybe looking to dispatch of Van Zien in due course because those tyres are a lot fresher and he's looking very comfortable through the chicane. That Mercedes not phased by the curves whatsoever, almost sending one up the inside as they made their way in towards the final corner. Be a case of how brave does Tinko feel, flashing the lights there. I think just saying, you know, I'm here, I'm quick. You can let me go, because I'm going to get past you eventually, and you know, would you really doubt him? It's Tinko Van der Velde, and he's trying to send one up the inside towards turn 1. That's just a little bit too far away, though, to make it stick, but he quite clearly has a lot of pace under brakes. Once again, Nils Naujoks absolutely flying right now. He was 6 and 7/10 of a second faster than Philippe Menard and Marco Bischoff. Ahead of him, 3 seconds now, the gap between himself and your race leader, with just under 30 minutes left on the clock. We'll have about 16 laps left of racing to go. Marco Schade unable to stick with the pace of this BMW. 2.2 seconds behind. IMLO closing the gap and applying the pressure. He's the only one doing the same kind of times as Nils is right now. But this overcut strategy call, like I say, we've seen the likes of Tinko make it work in the past, and Nils is in a car that we know has very good straight line speed around here. The BMWs, once they get themselves into a position where they can fight, very, very likely to manage to make an overtake happen if they've got enough laps to work with, because it's got a lot of grunt, it's got a lot of top end, and it is dealing also with the curbs around here very nicely. And that tyre advantage as well just all falls into the hands of last week's race winner. What a turn of form it would be for the BS Plus competition driver if he can take back-to-back victories after having been winless for so many seasons in the Pro Series, and to do it on home turf as well. Gap now 1.5 seconds to Philippe Menard as he continues to charge on Dario Emelo, closing up to the back of Marco Schade as well. But again, Nils, the fastest car on track, doing 53.1s constantly over the last couple of laps. He is absolutely flying as it stands at the moment. As once again, a big thank you to the incredible support. We've got 27 minutes of racing left to go. It's been incredible action and tension so far, and with Nils Naujoks on the charge, I think this one could end up going down to the wire. So buckle in, everybody, because it is going to be an incredible final third of this race as we look to end the first quarter of season 13. And we'll see exactly how the championship falls after that. If you are enjoying this stream, we are just 10 followers away from 1,900. It'd be incredible if we can get to that milestone by the end of today. So if you are enjoying what you're watching, then do consider following the channel, because we are racing like this every single week, and we are having a bit of a duel and a bit of, a duel. We've got a four-way fight with Mateusz Kuj, Spansky, Gamble, and Iemelo pushing along as well. Philippe Menard's done amazingly on that undercut strategy to get himself up into P2 and away from a lot of these other guys squabbling, but Nils Naujoks, last week's race winner in that BMW, is hunting these leaders down. The 1 point is a gap that now 1.2 seconds. He is absolutely flying. Whether that advantage starts to fade away, we'll have to wait and see. But the other thing is that Ferrari 296, it's on the oldest tyres of the bunch. He was the first car to pit inside the top 10. So the deficit right now between him and Nils Naujoks is about the greatest of this entire grid, and that Ferrari is not fantastic in a straight line either, and that BMW is mighty, especially up the hill when the power really starts to make a difference and you're fighting against not just aero on the car, but also gravity not being on your side either, as Spassky, Mateusz Kuhn, very close to one another. Maybe a dive down the inside for the ITV racing car. He's been looming in the rearview mirrors. Oh, as I thought Gamble was going to have something to say about it there. And it's invited George Boothby to go a little bit wide on the NC in towards turn 2. Can't quite make it work. And the championship leader, who's not having the greatest of days, he'll be, so often it's the benchmark of whichever car he takes, and Philippe Menard really is the one that is setting that as it stands. Martins, Santima battling away just outside of the top 20. And the McLaren better run through turn 1, able to stay in towards the apex a lot tighter. Could open up a line in towards turn 2 and maybe 3. We see moves being sent up the inside here before, but the Aston Martin is too good under brakes, and an opportunity to make a move stick will not be on the cards for Santima on this occasion. Martins holds onto that one. That's also what's so fantastic. Not only are we seeing here in the Pro Series that any manufacturer can fight it out amongst any other one, but that anywhere in the field you are, whether you are at the tail end of the pack, if you haven't had the greatest day of racing, or if you're at the pointy end of the grid, that you are in for a fight, and it just adds so much fun and drama to the racing that we get to see. As a white flag out for Vanteen Barrier, slow moment for him. I think a bit of contact actually between himself and Tinko van der Velde. Tinko lifting off the throttle and allowing Vanteen to retake the position. So I imagine there's been a little bit of contact at the hairpin, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able to look back, because look at this. Nils Naujoks, P3, has been clearing the gap between himself, the Ferrari, the McLaren that leads this race. The tyre advantage is mighty, the pace advantage is huge, and now he is just 1.5 seconds away from Marco Bischoff, who looked like he may have got himself in a secure spot for the race win, but last week's winner is starting to maybe just put a little bit of doubt in the two-time Pro Series champions' minds as it stands. Dario Emolo recovering from the penalty is in P5 at the moment, looking to try to get into P4, and exactly, couldn't agree more. If Nils is able to dispatch of the Ferrari relatively soon, there is no reason why he certainly can't have a go at the rear of that McLaren, but we'll have to see whether the South African is able to hold off the hard-charging BMW. Mistake for Iemelo gives a little bit of breathing space to Marco Schade. George Boothby still all over the rear diffuser of Henrik Gamble in this little tussle with the 3 McLarens that sit ahead of him. Matteo Malinowski moving very quickly as well, 4 tenths up on all of these McLarens up front. But it's going to be tough to make a move in that car. Hasn't got the greatest amounts of speed. Meanwhile, now we start to get into the BMW territory of the circuit, into the Schumacher S's. The tyres are going to be pivotal through this part of the lap. A little bit of extra momentum. The Ferrari's still good through here. Generates a lot of downforce. It's planted through this part of the circuit. But now, as we look to make the run up the hill, how late on the brakes does Nils dare to go? How much of a good exit is he able to get through turn 11? A little bit tighter to the inside parts of the track there, but it's a good run for Philippe Menard. The slipstream, though, coming off the 296. And that BMW closing towards the chicane shows his nose. And oh, I thought he was actually going to go on the inside there. Philippe Menard, does he cope with the pressure? He manages to hop and skip and jump his way through the chicane. Nils right now, this is like Mansell on centre at Monaco. If you ever saw that race, it was a huge tyre advantage on board the Williams driver, trying to find every and any opportunity to sneak his way through. But Nils Naujoks, he has a bit more track width to play with than Mansell did in that one. And he is trying to find where the advantages come from. 22 minutes, about 11 laps worth of opportunities still on the clock for Nils. But he needs to get past this Ferrari if he does want to make it back-to-back victories. And exactly, that's very much the point. Track position sometimes is the thing that's more pivotal, because Senna did close out that race. A defensive masterclass on the streets of Monaco. So who knows which way it could go between these drivers. But Nils is throwing everything that he can at this 296 ahead of him to see if he can get his way at least into P2. and then challenge the McLaren, the Sprout Esports car up front, but it's only a second and a half now that separates between the BS Plus competition car and the race lead. Adam Spansky still lurking all over the rear diffuser of Mateus Good. 0.2 of a second the gap towards the Dunlop hairpin they go, but no move sent up the inside there. Slightly different lines into that one. Number 7 car taking a bit more of that double apex approach and then trying to maximise the exit up through the Schumacher S's. As the two McLarens head on through, just need to check in on Nils because once again, just gaining a bit of time because that tyre degradation will start to kick in on Philip Manar's car and start to show some chinks in the armour for the South African. And Nils will be very much there, just trying to be patient, make sure he executes his attempt at an overtake once and once only, because otherwise, if you sit there scrapping away, if it doesn't quite come off, you're losing time, and Marco Bischoff is potentially getting that free ticket towards another victory of his ever-growing tally. Lap number 37 about to start underway. 0.4 of a second the gap between Nils and Philip Manard. Does he think about staying on the inside? Surely that's too far away. He is closing in the slipstream. He shows a nose up the inside. He's able to get later on the brakes, but it's too far away, and the Ferrari is not an easy car to outbrake either. He needs more of an overlap than that. Meanwhile, Spansky, Kuhn, Gamble, Boothby and Malnowski now all nose to tail this quintuplet, fighting away for P6 and down, as also we've got Kolosov versus Noarida, the Aston Martin down the inside of the Sprout Esport McLaren, down the inside again on the return, trying to see if he can maintain the position into turn 3. They'll go side by side. We've seen positions made up here before, but a bit of a wide entry for the number 14 car, but he can set up potentially a better exit, get the momentum out of turn 4, but with a kick of oversteer, he will be unable to seek any further distance to the car in front. Checking back in towards your lead fight. The gap between Nils and Marco Bischoff is maintaining around the same. So the pace between the number 1 and the number 25 car in those front 2 positions of this race is very similar. That was a little bit deep through the Schumacher S's. That is how hard Nils Naujoks is trying, and also how much effectively the upwash that you receive from the car in front. Again, your 2 leaders going a little bit wide on the exit of turn 10 then, and just giving opportunities to Nils. This is where the BMW is particularly strong on the climb up the hill, but he really needs to be closer on the exit of 10 if he even dares to think about going down the inside or even around the outside at the chicane. How do they fare through there? Pretty even once again. Philip Manard looking composed in this part of the circuit. And out of the final corner, you can hear the rear tyres struggling on the back of this number 25 car, but it's good enough to keep the German at bay. And BMW closing the distance, 0.3, 0.2 by the time we get towards the braking zone, and he sent it down the inside. Nils going from downtown, trying to make the move, trying to use a tyre advantage. It's been beautifully calculated, but Philip Manard still on the inside in towards turn 2, little bit of door banging, and Marco Bischoff will be loving this because this is opening up the gap, and Nils is going to send it back down the inside of turn 3. This is not what he wants. He needs to try to get through as quick as he can if he wants to challenge for the race win, but Philip Manard is defending with his life on the line right now, and he's bringing in the likes of Marco Schada, Iamolo into this as well. The BMW sent towards the outside, in towards turn number 5 now, tries to make it stick, surely can't do that. He's still got a nose up the inside turn 6, camber in favour of the BMW, traction in favour of the M4 as well. Schada with a great view of all of this kicking off, trying to find an opportunity. He may even be making his way past Philip Manard as well, and the defence finally comes to an end. It started at turn 1, it ended at turn 6, but Nils Naujoks gets himself up into P2, and with 17.5 minutes on the clock, 2.5 seconds between himself and the race leader, opportunities still available to make it back-to-back victories for the BS Plus competition driver, and now he has to just lay it all down and try to push as hard as he can. Remember, track limits are a really, really big factor around here, and it can all descend into chaos so quickly. These guys have to be mindful of that. We don't quite know what the situation is with a lot of these drivers, but they'll know where they stand on that, and they need to be careful in the closing stages of this race. Dario Amelo, of course, recovering with his penalties. Not 100% certain if he still has one that will be applied post-race or not. I think he might, because I don't think it would have been applied to his car in time for his stop. So he is applying the pressure to the back of Marco Schada, but I think he will look to drop a bit further down the order. You can see Kuhn Spansky, Gamble, Boothby, Malnowski all battling away further down as well. Iemelo, 0.2 of a second. Does he think about a dive up the inside towards turn 1? It's a bit too far away, and he can't make it stick. I can also tell you that Nils, after the gap between himself and Marco Bischoff, upon finishing the overtake with 2.5 seconds, 1 lap has gone by, not even a whole lap, and that has already been chipped away at by half a second, make it 0.8 of a second. So that car has still got pace. It still has advantage in the favour versus the number 1 car that leads this race. Your pole sitter, who on strategy, consistency, and very good fighting, has managed to make his way back into the race lead, but the overcut from the BS Plus competition driver may start to make life a bit tricky in the final 10 minutes of this race. Santama taking the position from Martins and defending on the entry towards turn 1 to keep that car out in front. As looking towards Marco Schada again, he's managed to hold off a little bit of the attack from Iemelo, and you see that gap between Philip Menard and Nils Naujoks already growing to 1.2 seconds. That's the pace difference between those cars, and 1.5 seconds, even less than that, between the number 5 and the number 1 car that leads this race. So that gap is closing down corner by corner, and I think that we are going to have a showdown certainly in the next few minutes for the lead of this race. And also Marco Schada, of course, almost managed to start on pole position. It was snatched away at the final moments from your current race leader, Marco Bischoff. It was looking good for Schada to potentially come away with a race win, although moments like that won't be helping him, and he's gone wide into the final corner, and Iemelo, that is very likely to give an opportunity to the McLaren, because the McLaren good in a straight line down the inside. It's a drag race, VTEC power kicking on in for the Honda to try to defend. Does he get to the inside line before turn 1? Oh my goodness, he couldn't quite cover it off. Iemelo in the Veloce Academy car trying to go down the inside out the apex, still side by side. Philip Menard saying, thank you very much, lads, keep on battling away, and I'm going to bugger off. Towards turn 3 we go, and Schada manages to just about hold on to the position. Mistake made, but position maintained. Meanwhile, Nils Naujoks, now there is your gap, there is your fight for the race lead. 3/4 of a second separates the BMW and the McLaren out front. And last lap around 1.2 seconds was the pace advantage for Nils Naujoks. That is a big, big lap time, and that is a big concern for Marco Bischoff now, as that is not what he would have been wanting in that car whatsoever. Meanwhile, checking in on this fight for P6. Each of these cars still separated by just about half a second to one another, but no one able to make a move to one car in front. Vanteen Barrier on his charge back through the field. Got Michael Frey, the Swiss driver, in front of him. Tinko van der Velde, of course, on that overcut strategy, applying the pressure as well. In towards turn 6 they go, trying to see if he can make a move stick. But I do need to check back and forth, because once again, here's your race leaders, and it's a wide moment for Marco Bischoff, and Nils Naujoks absolutely glued to the diffuser now of the BMW. What is the pace difference up the straight? That's the wrong car. What's the pace difference up the back straight for the number 5? Closing in the slipstream is pretty good versus the McLaren, and that's a concern for Marco Bischoff, because it's not just a pace around the corners, it's not just a pace in the tyres he has to worry about, but it's the fact that this BMW has enough grunt to stick with this McLaren as they exit the final corner. 3/10 the gap, a little bit of a touch of the gravel that may have saved Bischoff on the run towards turn 1 on this occasion, but with 13 minutes left on the clock, 7 laps left to go, opportunity still available for this number 5 car to make a move, as George Boothby very close, battling away with Maciej Malinowski, who isn't going to be so friendly this time. He wants to go on the inside, in towards turn 1 they go. The two Veloce Esports cars going very close to one another, door to door. The Ferrari just about going to cover off the move on the inside. You saw the snap oversteer from the Porsche, trying to get the power down on exit, but could not quite do it, so they stay as they were. This little scrap that we were looking at not too long ago, Vanteen, does he think about a move towards turn 1 on this occasion? Does Tinko think about a move? Both of them closing under the brakes, but unable to make their way past the cars in front. But back towards your leaders. Nils Naujoks will go on board the BMW, looking through the windscreen of a car that is kind of just out of nowhere snuck its way into this fight. The strategy, I thought that overcut was perhaps a little bit too ambitious. He pushed it nearly all the way to the very edge of the pit window, But right now, as they head through the Schumacher S's, you saw how unstable the McLaren ahead was up in front, and this BMW is looking calm and collected. It's got one of the most experienced sim racers in this community behind the wheel. He knows how to win. He did it last week, and he's looking to carry this momentum through at his home circuit. Out of the exit of turn 11, the gap 0.3 of a second, a tenth closer than he was before, but unlikely to have an opportunity towards the chicane unless he was absolutely mad to look down the inside. He is going to stay behind for the time being. He doesn't need to risk that much just yet, and he's got to be mindful. Those curbs, wide moment on the exit for Marco Bischoff. The #1 car that's been in the race lead now for quite a while has got all sorts of pressure, and it wasn't the best runs out of the final corner. Santama and Vitshalk are battling for 20th position as well, but I need to keep an eye on this because it could be a dive up the inside for the #5 car. Does he go for it? He is going to look up the inside. Oh, he kind of goes back and forth. He can't make his mind up, but Marco Bischoff is unflappable in P1, and whilst Nils was trying to go back and forth and deciding, does he commitment? Has he got enough of the overlap? The #1 car just committed to his line, and that is one of the most important things about defence. Don't over-defend your position, because if you do, especially in a scenario like this, when the car behind is faster, it has better tyres than you. If you over-defend, you're sacrificing more than you need to, and they will capitalise in the next corners. Very experienced stuff from both of these drivers. Valentin Barrier making a move down the inside of Michael Frey, but he's gone too deep, and it's immediately the over and under for Michael Frey to get himself back into P16. It could be very busy though on the exit in towards turn 3, but defending the inside line is the Porsche. Tinko van der Velde also hunting around for an opportunity, but I need to look back towards your race lead. 1.5 seconds between Nils and Philip Menard behind, who's still keeping the likes of Shada and Iemelo out of these podium contentions. Still a great drive from the #25 car on that undercut strategy. The Ferrari, like we said, would likely maintain its tyres pretty well, and all things considered, for how aggressive the undercut strategy was, it's done remarkably well when you consider the pace advantage that Nils is showing on this overcut strategy. Again, 0.3 of a second the gap. He'll be absolutely glued to the gearbox of the McLaren by the time they get to the chicane, showing the nose towards the inside a little bit to fill up the mirrors of the #1 car, try to put him off, but also just to be able to see into the chicane, because it's so difficult to follow through at normal running speed in towards such a fast, high commitment part of the circuit. A bit of a wiggle on the exit for the #1 car, and once again Nils is absolutely locked into the slipstream. This looks like the best opportunity he's had so far. Does he think about diving towards the inside this occasion? He's winding up. He's like he's pulling his arm back for a mega punch towards the inside. Marco Bischoff leaves the space, and I think he's compromised his exit a little bit. Nils trying to go for the over and under. No reader has had a moment further down the order. I'm not sure if it was contact or if he's made a mistake in the chicane, but he's dropping positions, and he's gone all the way down to P18. Marco Bischoff, though, holds on to the race lead. I think we should, if we're lucky, be able to quickly check in and see what happened to No Reader, and I think there's going to be an Aston Martin. Sends it up the inside. It is. That's Valentin Barrier, and unfortunately, No Reader almost finding the barrier on the the left-hand side of the circuit on the exit there. And we'll look back towards that fight that we saw kicking off between Bischoff and Nils Naujoks, unable to follow through in towards the next sequence of corners, but that BMW still ramping up the pressure, and will be looking to make another move, I'm sure, very, very soon. Looking back to current pictures, Nils Naujoks, 0.3 of a second, as apparently Iemelo, another incident with Marco Shada. Shada's dropped a position now to P5, but there could be another penalty on the way by the sounds of it for the Italian driver. A busy day for him in the steward's room. And I think you're right, Carlo. I think there is a penalty already for Valentin for another incident. It's been a little bit tricky to try to keep up with everything because these guys at the front of the field putting on an absolute show. Nils Naujoks once again. There's only 7.5 minutes left. Does he think about the move up the inside this time around? Now he commits to it. Side by side between your leaders. Bischoff into the gravel. Nils maintains around the outside. Bischoff rejoins us still side by side in towards the final turn. And Philip Menard all of a sudden is back in the fight for the race lead. And Bischoff cuts the chicane. I wonder if he'll be allowed to get away with that, because it was a tap on the entry, but BMW hunting the McLaren down towards turn 1, now towards the outside line. Philip Menard trying to see if he can capitalise on the squabbling ahead. Nils Naujoks on those fresh tyres, trying to break it late as he can. Philip Menard almost into the back of him. Bischoff deep on the entry towards turn 1. Nils Naujoks out towards the outside line at turn 2. Can't make it stick there. Tries to go for a switch back out of 2 into 3. He's got the traction. Does Bischoff get towards the inside line soon enough? I'm not sure he has. BMW down the inside. Now towards the outside of turn 4. Can he make it stick there? He can't. Bischoff defending with everything that he's got. But the tyre advantage is so strong on board one of the most experienced people in this championship. Nils sent towards the outside turn 5. Philip Menard glued to the rear of his fight as well, just waiting for an opportunity. 6.5 minutes left on the clock. 5 laps remaining in this race, and it is going down to the wire. Marco Bischoff just about managing to keep Nils Naujoks behind. We'll try to see if there is any penalty handed out for the incident at the chicane, but my goodness, the way that these guys are fighting out on circuit right now, I'm not sure I can keep up with everything. I might need some assistance in the background, but right now, Bischoff, so again, through the Schumacher S's, the BMW with that extra tyre advantage is pacey in towards this part of the circuit, and it's really when they start to close the distance up the hill that the power starts to come alive in the M4. On the exit now, it's a good run, 0.2 of a second. It's the closest Bischoff has been with that McLaren, with the BMW breathing down his neck. Nils Naujoks, he sent it down the inside last time. Is he going to do it again? He's looking, and he's going to try to go for a move, but he does back out of it slightly. Bischoff, though, a little bit wide, hops over that curb. Millar in the fight as well, a 3-way fight, and IMLO is climbing into all of this. We think he may have some extra penalties on the way, so I'm not sure he's quite as much in this fight as the BMW, Ferrari, and the McLaren that leads away are ahead of him, but with 4 laps to go, it could go any way towards these 3 as it stands. Nils looks down the inside in towards turn 1. Marco Bischoff, unfazed once more, holds position, and the BF Plus competition driver will have to wait once more for an opportunity to come through. These tyres, the tyre advantage is just starting to fade away, I think, a little bit for the BS Plus competition car, and 5 minutes left to go. There's been 85 minutes worth of racing. As a 15-second time penalty has been delivered for the number 14 car. That's Kolosov. Further down the order, I think actually fact it was Kolosov that had the contact with Noah Reed and not Valentin Barrier. Excuse me. So that was what happened there. I quickly chime in on this little squabble with the 2 sister teammates. Jardier versus Angel Inostroza, looking up the inside in towards turn 3. Can't make it stick on the Mercedes driver. These 2 have been pushing nose to tail for a very, very long time. There's also a 5-second penalty for the number 17 car as well, and that belongs to, if I can see it, I can't see it, so we'll just move on, because with this fight we've got for the lead, I'm not sure there's too much more I can direct my attention to. Manara, as the 2 up front have just briefly settled down for a moment. The sparring match, it was Vietschorker, thank you there, Bradbury, in the chat. So Vietschorker with the 5-second time penalty as well, but these 2, once they settle down, they do have a slight pace advantage over those behind, and the gaps start to re-extend. Nils Naujoks needs to be patient with this, because he needs to make sure that the likes of Menard can't get amongst this battle when he's trying to overtake the McLaren. He shows a nose towards the inside of Bischoff once again. Through they go. Pressure on the number 1 car to try to see if he can take another victory, but he's got last week's race winner giving everything that he's got in the M4. Now, on to lap number 46. Just 2 more laps left to go in this one. 2 more big opportunities for Nils Naujoks. Towards turn 1 they go. Does he send it down the inside? But again, Marco Bischoff is not falling for that one. He doesn't defend the inside towards turn 1. He doesn't compromise his run through turn 2 and 3. And Nils is running out of opportunities, because really it's there and the run up the hill in towards the chicane. I just get the feeling that this final lap could be extremely busy. Your top 5 absolutely nose to tail. It's been an extraordinary race here at the Nürburgring for the 3rd round of season 13 in the Pro Series. And now heading in towards turn 5. You see wide moments left, right and centre for Marco Bischoff. He's been struggling with those tyres for a long, long time, but the pace is evening out between the McLaren and the BMW, but Nils still has that net advantage between the number 5 and the number 1 car. Into the hairpin. Hot pursuit, trying to maintain that pressure, trying to see how much he can extend these braking zones. He's experimented from time to time to see how late on the brakes he can go, and we may see a big send in towards either the chicane or turn 1. He's running out of opportunities with 1.5 laps in this race to go. It's going to go down to the wire, and I think these guys are going to be absolutely exhausted by the time they cross the line. I know I'm certainly going to be exhausted by the time we finish this one, but this is the Pro Series. This was what we want to see, the best of the best, going toe-to-toe around some legendary circuits, and these guys have absolutely brought it to the table. Bischoff then will go into the final lap in the race lead. Penultimate run through the chicane. It's a good run through the chicane, though, for Nils Naujoks. How does he fare out of the final corner? Under pressure is the number 1 car. It's a pretty good exit from the McLaren, and Nils needs to try to close the gap, but he might be too far away unless he absolutely sends it from downtown. He's been brave before. How brave does he feel this time? Bischoff does go to defend the inside, but Nils tries to send it as far away as he can, but he can't get up the inside of the McLaren. Bischoff manages to cover off the position, and the number 1 car maintains the lead in towards turn 1 on the final lap. Opportunities running out, using everything that they've got around this circuit, trying to make that McLaren as wide as possible. He's had to defend for almost 20 minutes from a car that had the best tyres out of the entire grid, and in the hands of somebody that knows how to take race victories and how to fight it amongst the very best on this platform. In towards turn 5 they go. Opportunities not available just yet. Manar waiting for an opportunity to see if he can capitalise on any disasters happening at the front of the field. Nils closing the gap towards the Dunlop hairpin for the last time. A potential overtaking spot, but you need to be closer than that. He stays behind the McLaren for the time being. How do they fare through the Schumacher S's? We've seen some wonky moments for the number 1 car through here. Nils once again composed, better momentum, but it's not a half bad run from your race leader either. In towards turn 10 they go. BMW trying to carry momentum through this apex and launch his way out of turn 11. You can see he's almost pushing the McLaren along on the exit, and what is the gap? It's 0.2 of a second. It's going to be a run up the hill up towards the chicane. Fireworks, I think, guaranteed to be on the way because Nils Naujoks applying the pressure. Bischoff does defend the inside line, but he doesn't get there soon enough. Nils down the inside, side-by-side contact between them again. Bischoff into the gravel, Bischoff off, Naujoks into the lead. Philip Manar on his way through, and Marco Bischoff in the final couple of corners. I think this is going to be decided in the steward's room, because as they fly towards the line on track at least, Nils Naujoks is going to give it back to Bischoff. Nils Naujoks sacrifices the run to the line. Either that or he ran out of fuel, I'm not quite sure. But one moment, Bischoff on my timing screen is not being classed as a race winner. I thought Bischoff had it at the line, but IMLO seems to have taken it. I need to look back on the replay. To find out what on earth has happened there. So here we go, the final sector. My goodness, what a showdown towards the final lap. We'll go on board. We'll try to go on board with Nils Naujoks. Hopefully, we get to see all of this to the very end of the race, because I don't quite understand, to be quite honest. So, Nils heading in towards the chicane. He sends it up the inside. Then there's the side-by-side contact. Bischoff goes off there as we go to the helicam. So there we have Naujoks into the race lead. Bischoff is sitting in P2 on the corner exit. Nils is going to back off here in some form or another, and as they get towards the line, oh bugger. That is, oh, for goodness sake. The racing, I can't actually work out who won. It does look like that the replay cut off, and yeah, but we do, from what we understand, IMLO had an extra penalty at the end of the race, so IMLO should have been dropped down the order. But who ended up playing? If there's stewards' inquiries, well, oh my goodness, one of the most dramatic and tense conclusions that I think we possibly could have had. I'm sorry, the replay only. I went to the maximum length of the replay. Honestly, I tried to show as much as I could. I've been failed by technology here, and I think across the line at least. So we've got some indication that it was Bischoff that ended up taking a race victory. Sorry, everybody. 0.2 of a second. If I could get some level of confirmation in here, that would be wonderful. Usually our race winner does end up making their way in for an interview, so that might be one way to tell what was going on there. But my goodness, the pair of Nils Naujoks and Marco Bischoff putting it down to the absolute wire in the end. And as we look towards our commentary box, who do we have sitting waiting for an interview? The answer is nobody, because I don't think anyone's actually fully aware who ended up winning. We believe it was Marco Bischoff. Nils Naujoks backing off across the line, not wanting to win it under those circumstances. He gave it everything that he had, and I believe that with the combination of conceding the position to Marco Bischoff and IMLO's penalty, unless there's an additional penalty that's handed the way of Nils Naujoks in due course, which there may be, but it may not be because he did concede the position at the line, we believe that Marco Bischoff has won the race. Nils, I think, is either second or third in all of that. And Philip Mannar and his undercut strategy, watching all the chaos unfold ahead of him, has just kind of snuck his way through and tried to make his way up into the podium after a masterclass in strategy from the South African. I don't know if we're going to have any interviews from anybody, whether or not they know who's won, whether or not they've got the energy to even talk after that one. I'm not quite sure. We will hang about and try to wait for an official conclusion, because if I could have some level of confirmation, as I do have Marco Bischoff sitting in the interview room, so I feel relatively confident, I think, on being able to bring him in for an interview to congratulate him on a race victory. It's either that or he's about to suddenly tell me that I'm very, very wrong, but I think that I can look to do that. So we will look to bring in the man that put it on pole at the start of this one and has had, I think, one of the most busy races that we have ever had in the Pro Series. Marco Bischoff, how are you feeling after that one? You must be exhausted.
Yeah, and I'm really destroyed. Yeah, it was so sweaty, so difficult to defend against Nils to the end, because he had the much better tires to the end because of his strategy. But yeah, I think one of the keys was the quali today. But then I lost a few positions on the start. And I knew it will be very difficult, because overtaking is always difficult on this. All guys are very, very fast, and the pace is the same, I would say. And yeah, to the end, it was a fair play from Nils, because side by side into the chicane is always not the best idea. So he pushed me a little bit wide, and then yeah, he let me go for P1. It was awesome, yeah.
Yeah, an incredible amount of sportsmanship, absolutely at the absolute death of that race. I imagine that when you went off into that gravel, because I think secondly your second trip through the gravel was a little bit more unnerving than the first one. The first one, you kind of were able to straight line it. It looked relatively composed, all things considered. That second one, there was a bit more opposite lock being applied inside the cockpit of that McLaren there. So amazing car control from you. And yeah, absolutely, that race, my goodness, you had to work so hard, not just, at the very end of that race, keeping behind Nils in that fast BMW, but recovering those positions from the start as well. How, when you found yourself back into the race lead at the halfway point, did you think, Philip Mannar, older tyres on board that Ferrari, should be able to kind of keep him in the 296 at bay? Did you think Nils was going to be a threat at that point, in the race, or did it come as a little bit of a surprise as he started to make his way up to the back of you?
Yeah, as I said, Nils had a very good strategy, because he did an overcut, and then he managed his tires very well in the second stint. And the Ferrari from Minar is always good to the tires, so I knew it will be very, very difficult. And yeah, my setup was not the best for my rear tires. So it was good for lap times, especially at the beginning. But then, yeah, it was a long stint, the second stint. And yeah, I don't know what to say. It's it's amazing to be here, to be back on P1. And yeah, it was a long time ago. My last win was a long time ago in Pro Series. So yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a way to get yourself back up to the top step of the podium. An incredibly hard-fought and I'm sure extremely memorable victory for you and all of that. Incredible stuff from you, and also a potentially an important moment again in terms of the championship. Of course, we're only a quarter of the way through the season, but we know that consistency ultimately is the thing that brings you championships. You know about as good as anybody how to win the Pro Series, and you came into this sitting in P3. George Boothby didn't have the best day. IMLO dropped a little bit down the order again with some post-race penalties, and you taking that race victory. Other cars around you in the championship as well, not the best day for them, so a very, very good day for you in terms of your championship campaign. Looking over into next week, we'll be going to Paul Ricard. Any instincts, thoughts, feelings? I know it's a kind of a circuit. Some people like it, some people don't like it. What's kind of your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I would say I like Paul Ricard. It's a good track for the McLaren, but we will see, because it's a new BOP and it need to figure out what car is good there or not. So it will be very interesting for all of us. But yeah, I would say the McLaren is much more, or we as a team are much more comfortable to the McLaren as a Lambo. So yeah, it's a good feeling with the car on all tracks we tested until now. So I think it will be a good race, but we will see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's Paul Ricard, although some drivers don't always enjoy it, it does tend to provide incredible racing, especially with that extremely long back straight. So I have no doubt that the Pro Series will deliver another exceptional bit of drama in that one. Huge congratulations to you, Marco, after an exhausting drive, I am sure, and to get yourself back another race win to add to your very extensive tally, even if it has been a little bit of a while. So a huge congratulations to you. Big thank you for coming in for an interview, and best of luck heading into next week at Paul Ricard.
Yeah, thank you, John. See you. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Marco. Take care.
Ciao, ciao.
Fantastic stuff there to speak to our eventually confirmed race winner, Marco Bischoff. It was all a bit of a weird way how that ended. Apologies on the replay front. I went back as far as I could, and for some reason the replay didn't show me to the point which I started it from, which was a little bit confusing, so very unfortunate to not quite catch the end of all of that. But I do believe that we kind of have some semi-confirmed results that have made their way through, because I can see in the stewards box that there are excuse me, what's the word to this phrase been so busy closing, still open cases in the stewards room regarding Marco and Nils, as well as also Marco Bischoff and Philip Manard. From what I can tell, there's not any conclusions as to whether or not there'll be something handed out there. So I think that these results could still be somewhat provisional. But once we are discussing a lot of that, we have got last week's race winner that's also popped in for an interview as well. And the man that's, I think at least on paper from what we have so far, Mr. Nils Naujoks trying his utmost to make it 2 wins on the bounce after an exceptionally fought battle between yourself and Marco Bischoff, but in the end just missing out. But a huge bit of applause from the chat and myself as well on the sportsmanship across the line as well. A very I think a great indication of your position within the community and the experience you've had in sim racing, and not an easy thing to do under that level of intensity and pressure. So incredible stuff from you. How are you feeling after what must have been quite an exhausting time behind the wheel of that BMW?
Yeah, exactly. I'm completely exhausted. I didn't even know it was a 90 minutes race. So on the grid, chat told me it's 90 minutes because I underfueled. Then I figured for 90 minutes I probably have to pee, so I ran for the toilet, came back, hoped someone would calculate the fuel. Took a bit more as a start, and then I think we figured out the first 10 laps what the fuel should be. Was a bit of a chaotic situation, and then eventually, once we sorted that, I got into a bit of a groove. Tried to keep the gap low to the guys ahead. They failed really fast on the first stint, where they I think had same fuel or a little less than myself. So I couldn't really do much there. And then I thought I'd just go long because everybody had penalties. And that was my only shot to get the fresher set of tires on low fuel, so I keep an advantage for 40 minutes or something. And yeah, I think it worked quite good, just not perfect in the end. We debated already if I should have kept that position, but in the heat of the moment, it's impossible to tell if I was too quick, if I would have pushed him wide, if he turned in too early. I only have 2 eyes, and so I decided to rather give him the position back, because if I get a penalty, I'm like P10, so I'd rather be P2. So it was fully calculated there, but I take the sportsmanship.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, we talk about when it terms of, being able to close out championships, and certainly this is a fight that, you have very much found yourself involved in now, with 2 extremely good results in the last couple of races. Consistency is key. I can also confirm that I've just seen confirmation that no further action being taken for those incidents on the final lap, so your P2 is cemented in place with that one. Whether or not you handing back the position had any influence on that, we'll never quite know. But yeah, it was certainly a dramatic moment heading towards the line after such an incredibly intense battle. When you went for that overcut strategy, I must admit, knew that it would put things heavily in your favour, especially at least relative to Philip in the Ferrari, because he went for quite an aggressive undercut, the first to pit inside of the top 10. But the
7 or 8 laps on him,
but the pace advantage that you had with your tyres, to be able to reel in that gap, kind of really brought you into that fight for P1, somewhat kind of out of nowhere to some extent. How confident were you when you went for that overcut that you'd really be able to challenge for the win in the second half of the race?
Oh, I wasn't confident at all, because as I said, in the first stint they were really quick, so I didn't know if they would just have better tire wear, for example, and my advantage wouldn't be big enough, or if I could make it stick, or where I would end up in the first place, because I was also lucky that I think Kuhn messed up his pit stop, lost a couple seconds, and Marco Schade in the Honda, who I raced 20 years ago, right? It's really good to see him back in the front there as well. And he messed up his pit stop as well, so he ended up behind me. And Dario got himself penalties, ended up behind me. So suddenly from P6 I was already in P3. And yeah, with me now taking that aggressive undercut to kind of force himself in the better position, in the end turned out to be in the Rigo's position. But if we had more cars between us, maybe I would have never been close enough to him also. So it was all really unfolding as it happened. And it was the only chance I had to make somewhat of a difference. So I didn't really had a need to cover their strategy. I would kind of just allow Phil to pass, because he was faster anyway initially there. And so yeah, I thought let's go as long as we can. But I had no clue if it would work or not, and I had to take a quite risky dive on Phil to even get alongside into turn 1. And then we had a bit of a over-under for the entire first sector, which was really great with him as well. And I could just barely make it work. And the McLaren, I guess, still has a bit more grunt on the straight, so it was even more difficult with Marbix. And yeah, eventually the only chances I got was into the chicane, which is the worst spot you can have a chance. So I was somehow hoping he'd at least once make a mistake somehow in the last corner, but he just didn't. So his win.
Absolutely, yeah. It was an absolutely mighty tussle and battle of the ages, I think, in the Pro. That's definitely one of those races that I think is going to go down in history, because that was an incredible showdown between yourself and Marco. And also, just kind of hustling the back of you. You could kind of never quite ignore those cars in the rearview mirrors either. You had to be very careful about how you battled with Marco for the lead of the race, because any bit of squabbling that put you a bit offline or stuff like that. Philip, Dario, Marco, they were all in prime position to capitalise as well. So such an epic battle in all of that, and a big congratulations on the P2 in the end, even if I imagine there's a little bit of frustration there, of course, to not come away with a second victory in the season. But, like I say, a very good still opening start of the season for you, and being able to very much firmly put yourself in that championship fight. We'll be heading over to Paul Ricard next week, a circuit where you have also very firmly battled in the for the race win in that one. I do recall a slight miscalculation with Tinko of a bump draft that rather helped him take the lead and then kind of never saw him again. So I'm sure you'll be trying to avoid that sort of scenario next week. But how are we feeling being back with the BMW at that French race circuit? How are we feeling? Oh. Hopefully,
with,
oh, sorry, I think Discord cussed out there for a second, Nils.
Oh, sorry.
It was starting
Am I
on that
back?
one. Yes, you are back.
So yeah, it's one of those tracks where we had, well, I remember the most legendary fights really that I ever had in ACC. I think it was with Luke Whitehead.
Yep.
2 seasons ago maybe or so, I don't know.
I think Discord keeps on cutting in and out.
For a full hour with Dara McCormack, and also ended up second, so I have to change something about that this time around. Let's see how the McLaren nerf plays it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, unfortunately, we're having a little bit of Discord
It
connection
flips the switch.
issues. It's the Discord
We'll call it a
connection
day.
issues are being a bit of a pain, but I think we've got the gist of what you're saying, Nils. Yeah, absolutely. You've been in the fight on multiple occasions around that circuit. Quite clearly, you're showing that you're in fantastic form this season with the M4 as well. So will be very interesting to see whether or not you can go that one step better when we head over to Paul Ricard next week for 60 minutes of action there. So fantastic stuff from you this evening. Incredible effort and an amazing show from you to charge your way back up to P2. So close to the race win, but just pipped to the post on this occasion by Marco in that one. But congratulations to you. Big thank you for coming in for an interview. And we'll see how you get on next week at Paul Ricard, and best of luck for it.
Bye.
Thanks a lot, Nils. Great stuff to talk to the man that finished in P2 in the end. Like I say, I do have some confirmed results now. It was a little bit ambiguous for some time there as we were waiting to see how things concluded. But after speaking to the drivers that have been confirmed as finishing in P1 and P2, I can now show you and run you through the race results from today. So Marco Bishop takes a well-earned victory ahead of Nils Naujoks, and Philip Menard rounding out the podium with that amazing undercut strategy. Sharda P4, Kun P5, Spansky Gamble, Boothby, Malinowski, Iamalo down to P10 in the end, with Tiskovic, Inostroza, Jardier, Valentine, and Van der Velde managed to work his way back up towards the top 15. In the end, Michael Frey, Ida, Santaba, Kolosov, Martins, Ognornikov, Duran, Tillich, Vitschorka, Neuwirth, Walsingham, Morant, Bukowski, Prima, and De Campo to the end of the top 30. As we head down, I think these are your retirees from today: Polyakov, Florian Durikov, Addison, Manson, Hosseini, Vastner, Van Thielen, and Lobmeyer in that one as well. So a very busy day for everyone all round. It's certainly been a busy time for the stewards and for myself in the comms box. I also just want to say a huge thank you for the incredible support. You absolutely smashed that milestone. We've got 30 followers over it, so a big thank you for all of the amazing support. A warm welcome to all of you that joined tonight. And if this was your first experience of the Case King Pro Series, let me tell you, that's not a one-off. That's the way that things tend to play out every week. That was a particularly special race, I must admit, but the drama, the intensity, the action is the same week in, week out. So if you have followed today, then buckle in, because there is more to come on this championship as we bring the first quarter of this incredible series to a close, heading over to Paul Ricard for next week. And also a big thank you for a lot of the kind words in the chat amongst all of the chaos, the action, and everything taking place, even post-race. I'm trying to conclude what happened. I did manage to catch a glimpse at those, so a big thank you for all of that. But that is round number 3 of the Case King Pro Series, brought to a close today. An absolutely legendary battle between two legends of the sim racing community, showing how it is done and putting on one of the greatest shows that I think we have seen in GT racing on ACC. But be sure to see those guys and others amongst this incredibly talented grid going toe-to-toe again in the future. The Nightbot once again kicking into action against you wonderful people. It's a little bit harsh sometimes. It's doing his best. He's trying his best. He's a bit like the replay man. Doesn't quite get it right. But incredible stuff to look forward to in the future. So if you did enjoy all of the action, chaos and glory that we saw on the screen today, then do look to follow the channel if you haven't already, because we'll be back next week for Paul Ricard with more more 60% incredible goodness, and Carlo already giving us a bit of a heads up for the fact that we could even have some mixed conditions at play there as well, which always adds a little bit of extra fun to the mix as well. And if you are just wanting to be a part of this amazing ever-growing community, you can also join the Discord server. We're a friendly bunch over in there. You can talk everything sim racing, real racing, talk about your pets, show what you've been up to in the week, and there is a lot of friendly people in there to greet you into this wonderful, wonderful place. And we have almost 150,000 of you in the LFM community. And if you're looking at the action that you saw tonight and thinking, watching is great and all, but how can I get behind the wheel? Well, never fear, because if you head over to lowfuelmotorsport.com, you can get yourself signed up, get yourself a license, work your way up through the ranks, and compete in series like this against the very best of the best, and for some fantastic prizes as well. And also, of course, alongside championships like the Pro Series, we have things like endurance, we have daily racing amongst ACC as well. There is also stuff, of course, with the GT2 pack and the A1 GP circuit that has made its way onto the LFM platform as well, so you can dive into exploring all of that new content to this incredible sim racing platform. And also, if you're looking to explore other things as well, then perhaps Assetto Corsa 1 on the LFM platform as well will be the place for you to go, because there is all sorts of crazy stuff over there. Touring cars, MX-5s, open wheelers that you can dive into. Also some Nordschleifer stuff as well, if you really want to take on one of the biggest sim racing challenges that you can. So much to get involved with, and also the WRC Club Championship on the community as well. So such a big range, such a big ever-growing community, and fantastic to have all of you joining and increasing this wonderful, wonderful pool of people that we have here in LFM. So do look to get involved in all of that. But that is it then for today. An incredible thank you for all of the amazing support. Big thank you to the stewards that had just as much of a busy time as always. And of course, a big thank you to all of our hidden heroes in the background making all of this incredible racing possible that we get to enjoy week in, week out. We'll be back again next week for Paul Ricard for round 4 of the Case King Pro Series. And I'm sure it's going to bring us just as many fireworks as it has done in the past, and from what we saw from the Nürburgring today. So do tune in for that one. So look forward to seeing as many of you then as possible. But for tonight then, goodbye.